The story begins with the virtual reality game called Zero Fantasy, the most popular game in the world, also known as ZFO. And in this game, our MC is about to become the first person in the world to reach the maximum level cap. He was clicking his mouse frantically, trying to complete his goal. Exhaustion was already hitting him hard while he mumbled that it was impossible. His body could barely handle the toll of playing like that. Realizing that 200 hours straight without a break was overkill, he decides he will eat and sleep as soon as this is all over. The reason for all this effort was just the desire to achieve something huge. His wish was to master a single thing and have his name engraved in history. But whether in his studies, things just didn't work out. Even in sports, the results ended up being frustrating. The young man concludes that he would never become number one in anything. Clenching his fist tightly, frustration took over. Despite all that, he believed that in ZFO, the story would be different. The giant monster went in for the attack with everything it had. Our MC also charged forward, ready for the final clash. With that strike, he could finally become the number one in the world. But reality hit differently as the boy ends up coughing hard and taking the virtual reality helmet off his head. Completely in shock, he wonders what was happening and if it was some kind of joke. Cursing the situation, he notices his vision was starting to go dark. Regret hit hard for being so close to his goal. The computer screen displayed the game over warning while his body collapsed into the chair. Having the final level right before his eyes, he ended up passing away in real life. Suddenly, a groan escapes as the sight of a blue sky begins to appear. Now with a different appearance and in an unknown place, he tries to understand where he ended up. At that moment, a desperate scream begging to stop catches his attention. Looking to the side, he sees green goblins attacking the locals. The chaos continued with the creatures crushing the villagers without mercy. While the people ran trying to fend off the beasts, the boy recognizes those monsters as the goblins from ZFO. A farmer was trying to defend himself by attacking the red beast with a pickaxe. The strike hits dead on, but the weapon simply bounces off the monster's skin without causing any damage. The creature stares at the man, wondering what he was, revealing itself to be a level 7 fire goblin. Terrified, the level 1 farmer steps back from the threat. While the villager fled in despair, our MC looked at his own hand, noting he could feel his body perfectly. He understands the situation and concludes he reincarnated in the world of his favorite game. Quickly coming up with a plan, the young man keeps his cool and activates the system's status panel. The interface reveals that he was now called Alan, and the boy thinks that's not a bad name at all for his new life. Disappointment takes over as he notices he was level 1 with no defined class, because he remembers he almost reached the top before meeting his end, and now had to start all over again. His train of thought is interrupted by the villagers running toward him, calling his name. A bald older man was desperately begging for help. The boy analyzes that older man like an NPC and notices they recognized him as an adventurer due to the plea for help. That confirmed this world followed the exact same main storyline as the game, where adventurers needed to fight the Demon King's army. The young man asks for a moment of patience and announces he is going to choose his professional class right then and there. The old man finds that absurd and warns him that at level 1, he was no different from them, making it impossible to defeat that fire goblin. Alan silently agrees as he ponders how to deal with the monster while being so weak. The blue screen showed the options, and he knew normal classes wouldn't stand a chance against a level 7 enemy. His attention turns to a weird profession focused entirely on the crafting skill. During the original game, this choice was considered the worst possible trap for a player. The perspective on the skills completely changes, considering that this world was now real. The boy decides he would use a very specific feature of that crafting class. With his class set, he prepares to test in practice if his theory was right. The MC focuses energy in his hands, activating the main skill of his new profession. Glowing particles begin to gather, taking a metallic shape in midair. The result of the crafting was a complete assault rifle ready for combat. He celebrates the success, confirming the rule that crafting things just by understanding their structure worked by using his knowledge from his past world. All that time studying to be the greatest mind in the world was finally paying off. The young man's level of knowledge was so wild that he understood even the inner workings of a fighter jet. The villagers are shocked, not recognizing the weapon, asking if he really had chosen the worst class of all. A little chuckle escapes as he notices the class's bad reputation was exactly the same in these lands. He pulls the bolt of the weapon and gets ready to prove them wrong. Without wasting time, the boy opens fire on the creatures from afar. The shots keep going steady as he keeps his aim locked on the target. The weapon's power takes out the monster's head in the blink of an eye, leaving the old man's jaws on the floor. The rifle's barrel was smoking, confirming the brutal efficiency of that modern gear. The boy reflects that in a world restricted to medieval tech, he could bring any modern arsenal he wanted. Because of this insane loophole, that useless profession became something god-tier in his hands. The locals could barely believe a rookie adventurer had wiped out such a strong monster that fast. Confusion took over their minds as they tried to process what had just happened. The MC holds out his hands and offers his power to the farmers, stating they could take care of the enemies themselves now. Light materializes in the hands of the guy wearing a beanie, forming a heavy weapon identical to Alan's. The two villagers hold the rifles, amazed by the weight and shape of the equipment. Extremely grateful, they thank him for the incredible weaponry, while Alan reinforces that his class allowed him to craft as many as he wanted. Even fully equipped, the guy with the beanie shows concern about accidentally shooting an ally. The young man cuts the tension, guaranteeing he put a restriction on the weapons, preventing them from causing damage to anything other than monsters. To prove his point and show it was safe, the MC simply fires a shot right at the guy with the beanie, who screams in panic. The villager shakes with fear and braces himself, expecting to feel the impact of the round going through his body. The bald villager flinches in terror, expecting the worst, but Alan quickly lets them know the weapon is completely safe. With that guarantee, the two farmers open fire on the monsters, yelling that this was payback for everything they did. The intense crossfire tears through the green goblin's skin without any mercy. Facing that scene, our MC just watches the sweep in silence. A system screen pops up confirming his level up to level 2, and the boy is surprised by how fast he leveled up just by providing gear to other people. The panel details that when a monster is defeated with a crafted weapon, a portion of the experience automatically returns to the original creator. Very grateful for the rescue, the bald man approaches, handing over a shiny jewel as a thank you to the young man. He examines the item closely, immediately recognizing the magic stone dropped by a fire goblin. This stone contained the creature's sealed power, being the main resource adventurers used to make money at the local guild. In that world, the guild extracted the magic energy from these stones, converting everything into useful resources for society. Suddenly, a scream of terror interrupts his thoughts, making everyone look desperately in the same direction. A huge goblin wearing heavy armor and holding a shield comes running across the field. The boy squints, realizing right away that this enemy was a boss-class monster. Being a level 13 goblin knight, this creature's strength was on a completely different level from the lesser beasts that had shown up so far. Confident with their new weaponry, the two farmers ask Alan to leave the creature to them and start shooting frantically. The rounds violently collide against the giant metal shield without causing any damage to the enemy. The monster smiles creepily, realizing those attacks were nothing but a tickle on its tough skin. The creature moves forward relentlessly, while the duo of villagers panics upon noticing the shots had no effect at all. At this point, the MC evaluates the situation with concern, knowing that at his current level, it would be tough to craft a tool capable of piercing that defense. Wasting no time, the goblin knight charges with everything, kicking up dust everywhere it goes. Overcome by despair, the farmers yell for the boy to run away before he ended up getting taken out. Keeping his cool, the young man looks at the magic stone in his hand, remembering that the crafting skill could also consume items for repairs or upgrades. The monster jumps really high, readying a crushing final blow with its spiked club. With an agile move, Alan dodges the heavy impact that shatters the ground, thinking it couldn't hurt to try using the magic core right then. He activates his class, enveloping the jewel in a bright blue light typical of crafting energy. The glowing particles quickly take shape, forming the heavy, military structure of a new piece of gear in midair. The materialized object is none other than a modern rocket launcher, loaded with the explosive attributes coming from the fire goblin's stone. He rests the massive weapon on his shoulder, celebrating the successful fusion of materials with a smile. To guarantee the damage would be devastating, the boy focused all the stone's power into a single highly destructive shot. A bright flash lights up the field as the rocket is launched, tearing through the air at high speed toward the monster. The goblin knight's eyes go wide, caught completely off guard by the glowing projectile coming its way. A massive blast swallows the creature, raising a pillar of flames and instantly securing 2 extra levels for the adventurer. Satisfied, he checks his status on the panel, confirming his quick, direct evolution to level 4. The smoke clears, revealing only the leftovers on the ground, while the farmers are left in shock seeing a boss getting defeated with just one hit. The bald old man tries to understand what happened, since the tools of that specific class were supposed to be much weaker than normal ones. Meanwhile, Alan gathers the loot, reflecting that weapons generated with magic stones automatically break after spending their total energy. Impressed, the duo asks if he happens to be part of some famous warrior clan due to that insane strength. The young man just turns his back and calmly replies that he is just a rookie, as they could tell by his simple clothes. At that exact moment, in this new fantasy world, the legend of the one true crafter had just been born. The prophecy of a supreme being capable of putting an end to the long-lasting war against the Demon King's army was just beginning to unfold. This figure shrouded in mystery would bring total chaos to the enemy forces, manipulating otherworldly tech with his own hands. Walking calmly through the forest, the boy tosses the new magic stone in the air, pleased to have perfectly figured out the mechanics of his rejected class. He grips the item firmly, planning to use that same absorption method to rank up way more efficiently. Full of determination, the MC promises himself he'll be the first person in that entire world to reach the maximum level of 99. His next test stop happens in front of a giant stone golem blocking the path in the middle of the woods. Now already at level 13, the boy aims his assault rifle, ready to put his recent skills to the test once again. Facing the level 20 beast, he mumbles a confession that he didn't expect to find such a huge target right away around those parts. Without hesitating, our MC pulls the trigger, unloading a continuous burst of fire right in the monster's face. The rounds hit the rocky body, causing dozens of tiny glowing bursts from the kinetic impact. Despite the initial damage, the open wounds on the creature's body begin to release a magical smoke, quickly healing the holes. In a matter of seconds, the stone giant is completely whole again, letting out a deep guttural sound, ready for combat. Watching that, the young man figures out that besides an insane raw defense, the enemy also had high cellular regeneration capabilities. He checks the floating screen on his weapon, noting that relying purely on physical attacks to break that roadblock would be a waste of time. Far from worried, the boy cracks an excited smile, because that super tough target was the perfect opportunity to test the part's modification feature. The intense blue light wraps around the metallic machinery as he starts the crafting process, focused on a specific area. This time, the energy gathers on the side, molding an extra rectangular component with a hollow space in the middle. The new metallic attachment perfectly locks onto the rifle's frame, changing its original design and opening up new tactical possibilities. His reasoning was simple. If he managed to equip the magic core without fully fusing it with the main weapon, it wouldn't need to self-destruct after use. This added compartment would serve exactly to channel the stone's elemental energy and amplify the firepower continuously and safely. With the modification done, he opens his spatial inventory, which glows in cyan, to grab the material needed to finish the project. An orange golem magic stone falls perfectly into the palm of his hand, straight from the system's storage. With extreme precision, the boy pushes the jewel right into the new rectangular slot recently installed on his rifle. The crystal locks in with a click, starting to glow brightly as it connects its magical essence with Earth's engineering. Fully focused on the battle, he looks up, getting ready to evaluate the practical outcome of his attachment theory. Electrical discharges run through the whole barrel of the machine gun, visually confirming that the special piercing attribute was successfully activated by the system. Satisfied with the floating screen, the young man reads out loud that the effect extracted from the magic stone would completely ignore the target's physical resistances from now on. Across the clearing, the stone golem raises its heavy arms, letting out a furious roar that echoes through the trees. Unintimidated by the colossal size, the MC aims steadily at the creature, daring it to withstand his new and improved attack. The shots now come out as concentrated beams of light, slicing through the air quickly and hitting the monster's chest dead on, with no chance of defense. The continuous impact is devastating, making the giant's rocky shell start to crack and blow apart into smaller pieces due to the extreme piercing. Focused on finishing the job, he keeps his eyes half closed and his finger locked on the trigger, leaving no opening for the enemy to try and heal. Unable to heal such deep damage in time, the colossal monster crumbles to pieces, letting out one last grunt of pain before giving out. A big final blast scatters boulders and dust everywhere, marking the definitive defeat of the level 20 beast. The fog clears and a new level 14 notification pops up as the boy calmly evaluates that his field test was an absolute success. Inspecting his smoking weapon's side attachment, he notes with relief that only the consumable crystal crumbled, fully preserving the integrity of his modded rifle. Crouching down to pick up the fallen enemy's reward, our MC grabs the small magic stone left by the monster after the combat ended. Right after, a bluish holographic notification pops up in midair, letting him know the peasants from Shuron village fended off a horde of orcs using the crafted weapons, making him realize in surprise that he just leveled up to level 15. Apparently the farm folks were really putting the military gear he handed out during his travels to good use. Strolling down a dirt road, he reflects that thanks to this strategy, he ended up gaining experience points entirely, passively, without having to lift a finger. Realizing he could pitch in for people's safety while constantly leveling up, the boy is absolutely certain that choosing the crafter class was the smartest move. Meanwhile, the imposing central headquarters of the Adventurers Guild stands out under the bright afternoon sun. Inside, the vibe changes fast when one of the staff members gets their co-workers' attention, commenting in awe about an adventurer who was leveling up at an explosive rate over the last few days. In front of a magical monitoring mirror, a female employee stutters in disbelief upon seeing the absurd numbers popping up on the system's registry screen. The supervisor with glasses steps up, arguing with his subordinates that jumping from level 4 to 15 in just 4 days was a simply impossible speed. Unable to process the situation, he even wonders out loud if there wasn't some kind of major glitch in the guild's tracking orb. Analyzing the floating data in detail, the group notes that the prodigy's name is Alan, a completely unknown rookie to everyone there. The overall shock peaks when a woman points to the boy's profile, unable to believe a job considered useless like crafter could level up so fast. Trying to solve the mystery and calm everyone down, the supervisor claims to have the record of the most recent battle, ordering the scene to be projected directly onto the central magic crystal. The holographic image shows the MC taking down the massive stone golem, drawing gasps of shock from the watchers due to the exclusive use of pure physical attacks. With his eyes glued to the combat projection, one of the evaluators tries to figure out what kind of bizarre shining weapon was that glowing in the young adventurer's hands. Next to him, another high-ranking official admits he had never seen anything like it in his entire professional life dealing with adventurers. Handling a monster of that caliber, which boasted absolute physical defense, in such a casual and effortless way defied all known logic in that world. Watching the golem crumble into thousands of pieces on the image, the team concludes in amazement that this piercing firepower belonged to a completely different category altogether. The supervisor calmly assesses that even with Alan's recorded level being only 15, his raw destructive strength easily matched a level 50 warrior's. What scared the officials the most was the breaking of the fundamental rule that weapons crafted by artisans were always supposed to be inferior to standard gear provided by the system itself. Unable to unravel the shady mechanics behind those creations, the man with glasses admits the young man was definitely operating on a tier isolated from humanity. With a super serious look on his face, he orders the team to report the situation to the guildmaster immediately because things had gotten serious. He confides in his peers that there was a strong suspicion that the mysterious vessel they had been looking for had finally shown up in the region. However, the tense investigative chat is abruptly cut off when the tracking orb in the middle of the table starts glowing brightly again, demanding immediate attention. Quickly, one of the assistants points to the sphere, panicking as he warns that the young crafter had just engaged in a new, heavy confrontation. This time, the signal detected on the monitor confirmed that the boy's target was none other than another fearsome boss-class monster. In the middle of the scorching desert, a giant sandworm violently emerges from the earth, revealing itself to the system as a level 27 beast. Facing the colossal creature's screeching roar, Alan calmly evaluates the tactical pros and cons of his newest and scariest opponent. He figures out that although the beast had relatively low defense, its health points were abnormally high, making it the ideal guinea pig to push his creation's limits. The MC ponders that the rocket launcher was devastating, but the big issue with that heavy weapon was only holding one shot at a time. Intrigued by the possibilities, the boy wants to find out how far he could stack firepower into a small piece of gear using magic stones as add-ons. Without wasting time, he holds up the golem crystal he just got, determined to put it to the test right away on his new mod. The system's holographic interface activates in front of his chest, giving off a vibrant light as the instant forging process begins. In moments, a compact silver pistol materializes floating in his hand, featuring decent base power and a capacity for 17 regular rounds. Holding the light armament, he concludes that the structural fusion with the magic crystal would provide an absolutely broken extra damage option. With a crisp, precise click, our MC snaps the raw jewel right into the bottom base of the newly crafted weapon, activating the magical link. A wave of cold blue energy radiates from the metal instantly, as soon as the ice elemental attribute is successfully infused throughout the barrel. The system confirms the creation of the freezing attribute, which applied a massive attack multiplier and turned all standard projectiles into spikes of pure ice. Flashing a confident smirk of satisfaction, the young man notes the final result turned out exactly as his attachment theory planned. The huge strategic advantage of using that element was obvious, guaranteeing almost absolute safety during his hunt against massive monsters. He knew that even if the monster wasn't taken down in one shot, the side effect would freeze the target, preventing any kind of fatal counterattack. Going on a brutal offensive, the huge worm dives straight at the MC, who stands his ground, trusting he would never miss a target that size. With the pinpoint accuracy of a veteran, Alan aims his upgraded pistol and fires right into the colossal beast's wide-open maw. The modified round cuts through the air and hits the creature's core, releasing a concentrated blast of devastating cold energy right on impact. Instantly, a thick, heavy layer of ice starts spreading across the worm's body, locking down its wild movements while the room temperature drops. Without showing a hint of physical effort, the boy just seriously watches his creation's scary power consume the boss-class enemy from the inside out. In a few seconds, the whole monster turns into a giant frozen statue in the middle of the desert, completely neutralized and helpless. The high-pitched sound of ice cracking under internal pressure breaks the silence of the area, highlighting the structural weakness the massive target just suffered. Lowering the weapon that was still giving off a cold mist, the young man proudly assesses the huge remains of his latest and undeniable victory. He concludes in awe that even a simple handgun could take out a boss in the blink of an eye, proving he didn't need to rely on a rocket launcher's destructive power. Taking a deep breath under the sunlight, the young man officially confirms his theory that the crafter class was undeniably a god-tier profession. Gathering the rich loot left by the defeated beast, he holds a beautiful red crystal between his fingers and decides to wrap up his practical testing routine right there. With his spatial inventory packed, the adventurer takes the long road back to the city, intending to trade all those valuable stones for some good cash. Arriving at the busy local branch of the Adventurers Guild, he walks up to the front desk politely requesting to trade in his collected materials. The receptionist dumps a ridiculous mountain of shiny, colorful crystals on the table, totally blown away by the staggering amount. Thrilled to receive such a rich batch of resources, she says she'd gladly process it all, kindly asking the customer to state his name for the record. Keeping his cool posture and having no idea about the uproar his profile had caused at headquarters earlier, the MC simply introduces himself as Alan. Upon hearing that specific name, the clerk suddenly goes pale and breaks into a cold sweat, asking him to hold on just a second. She rushes to the back of the facility, leaving the boy standing in the lobby completely clueless as to why she reacted so dramatically. The sound of heavy metal footsteps echoes right behind the boy, who turns his head suspiciously, asking what was going on in that place. He ends up face to face with a squad of heavily armed knights surrounding him in the lobby, while the leader strictly confirms if he really was Alan. The armored soldier dryly announces the boy was under heavy suspicion, making the crafter lose his patience and demand an immediate explanation for this circus. Before he could even make a defensive move, magical blue light chains wrap around the MC's body, tying his arms tightly. Ignoring the boy's outrage, the guard announces that from that moment on, he was being forcibly escorted to the guild's headquarters. Transported quickly to a huge meeting room, the adventurer remains tied up in front of all the institution's top brass. Breaking the tense mood, the man with glasses and a goatee authorizes the removal of the binding spell, getting a close look to confirm the feared rookie's identity. In a surprisingly calm tone, the supervisor sincerely apologizes for the scare, excusing it by saying the absurdly fast leveling forced him to arrange that meeting no matter what. Rubbing his wrists that hurt from the chains, Alan mocks the team's warm welcome and asks straight up what the real point of all this theater was. One of the suited officials bangs on the table, stuttering nervously, and demands the rookie spill all the secret details of that weird tool he called a firearm. Letting out a long, tired sigh, the boy warns that explaining the mechanics would be useless since his gear was based on a set of technologies that didn't exist in that fantasy world. The blonde interrogator scoffs at the cocky answer, accusing the mere crafter of bluffing to hide cheap guild tricks. Annoyed by the official's sheer nerve, our MC summons his system screen in front of everyone and instantly forges an assault rifle identical to the peasants'. He tosses the heavy weaponry on the table, startling the interrogator, and tells the guy to inspect the gear all he wants so he'd stop talking nonsense. As soon as the rifle's status screen pops up, everyone goes into shock reading that the base attack power was terrifyingly locked at 50 points and it could fire 30 times. Turning his back to the stunned group, the young man lets them know he didn't have time to waste on red tape because his only goal there was to defeat the Demon King and become the first level 999 in the world. Keeping the urgency of the situation in mind, our MC reflects that just the other day a major city had fallen to the monsters. Turning his back, the young man warns he'll handle these issues eventually and asks them to make an appointment next time. Walking toward the door, he is interrupted by the man with glasses asking him to hold on and hear one last thing. Looking over his shoulder impatiently, the boy questions what the officers wanted this time. Persuasively, the group leader raises his finger and suggests that to level up faster, the best move would be to join a clan. Right away, the adventurer visualizes a team layout in his mind, trying to fully grasp the proposal. In his explanation, the supervisor details that this was an organization made up of adventurers and that he could introduce him straight into an A-rank group. Unexpectedly, a spiky-haired co-worker shoves the leader, complaining for him to stop trying to take advantage of the situation. An argument breaks out among the bureaucrats over which elite squad would be best for the rookie. Facing all that mess in the room, Alan raises his hand, apologizing for crashing the big shot's excitement. Showing zero interest in those offers, he announces he doesn't plan on joining any guild right now because he prefers to move solo. Disappointed by the rejection, the officials accept his decision and ask to be notified if he changes his mind later. Putting an end to the topic, the boy walks past the knights and heads out the door casually, saying goodbye to the squad. Alone in the big room, the men in suits watch the kid leave, commenting on how hard he was to deal with. With the weapon on the table, one of the members admits he had no clue how the thing worked, proving it wasn't something a level 15 crafter could make. To unlock the weapon's secrets, the higher-ups decide to summon the country's top crafters for a deep dive analysis. The scene now shifts to the base of a gigantic mountain where dozens of hunters were gathering around a glowing entrance. Right in front of the wolf mine dungeon, groups were getting ready to step into the portal. Arriving at the spot, our MC casually walks up, noticing how busy the place was, even in that world. With a friendly wave, a guy in a green bandana gets Alan's attention, asking if he'd like to round out their party since they needed one more member. However, the hunter's hype vanishes instantly upon inspecting the boy's profile and finding out he was only at level 15. Sweating cold, the man quickly steps back and pulls the invite right away, asking the rookie to forget what he just said. Watching the group walk off mumbling about the area's recommended level, the crafter just lets out a sound of pure indifference. Thinking about the situation, he admits he'd never come to a trash zone like that if it weren't for the level gap multiplier. This system guaranteed a massive amount of bonus experience since the fastest way to level up was exactly hunting enemies 10 levels above. Right in the middle of his thoughts, a girl's scream echoes nearby, instantly grabbing the young man's attention. In the middle of the crowd, a man is intimidating a small girl, asking in a creepy voice for her not to be so reluctant while his goons surround the area. With his tongue out, the level 65 swordsman named Lucas says he was just giving a friendly invite to the priestess Emma. From afar, the other adventurers whisper in disgust that the guy was forcing women to join his party again, but nobody had the guts to step in because of his high level. With a gross look on his face, the thug takes advantage of the rookie's fear, knowing there was nothing they could do against his strength. Terrified, the healer begs to be left alone, explaining she just wanted to party up with people her own rank so she wouldn't be a burden to anyone. Mockingly, the bad guy states that easy leveling was irresistible and she should just accept getting carried. Backed by his goons, the swordsman keeps bothering her, guaranteeing the setup would be a good time for the squad too. Suddenly, a strong blue energy starts glowing on the ground right under the troublemaker's feet. Tearing through the earth violently, a bronze hand surrounded by electric sparks shoots up from the ground like a trap. With no time to react, the high-level guy is completely frozen in shock seeing the magic. Startling his gang, Lucas is knocked to the ground by the metal structure, tripping in a pathetic way. Walking up to the girl, our MC apologizes, pretending his skill was hard to control. Keeping his usual calm look, the boy excuses it as just an accidental misfire from his forge. Sprawled face first in the dirt, the brute shakes with anger, unable to believe he was dropped by a casting glitch. Jumping up aggressively, the swordsman grabs Alan's clothes, threatening to end him and asking if the rookie knew who he was messing with. Cold as ice, the crafter tells the guy to chill, explaining he was just testing his crafting range and there just happened to be a blockhead exactly where the spell landed. With that direct insult, the thug's face twists in pure rage, calling the kid clueless. Drawing his heavy sword, the bad guy gets into an attack stance, ordering the brat to drop the lame excuses. Inspecting his opponent closely, the furious man spots the power gap and makes fun of the fact that the meddler was just a useless level 15. Laughing out loud, the goons start mocking their boss, asking why he wanted to pick a fight with someone so weak. Agreeing it would make him a laughingstock, the guy puts his sword away and decides to make an exception, letting the kid walk. Unbothered by the threats, the boy drops a dry thanks and starts walking away, taking the little priestess with him. Relieved, the girl confesses he saved her from a terrible fate, but the adventurer replies he didn't do it to protect her. Noticing the two walking away, the swordsman yells from afar, warning that their chat wasn't over. With a dark look, the brute makes it clear that even though he promised not to end him, it didn't mean he'd let him off the hook. Stopping in his tracks, our MC turns his head slightly, asking what the guy was planning on doing then. Pointing his finger at the dungeon, the bad guy suggests settling the beef through a competition. Yelling out loud, he challenges the rookie to see who could clear the dungeon faster. Staring at the taunt with a blank face, Alan listens to the threat that if he lost the time attack, he'd get his face smashed in. Outraged, the healer steps in, saying the bet was totally unfair because of the level gap between them. Putting on his creep face, Lucas licks his lips and says he wouldn't mind taking the young girl as his prize. Terrified by the guy's stare, the little girl shrinks back in pure panic. Showing zero fear, the crafter accepts the challenge, setting the condition that if he won, he wanted something in return. Closing his eyes in disgust, the boy cuts his own sentence short, saying actually he didn't need any reward from garbage like him. Full of confidence, the swordsman scoffs, saying the kid was only backing down on the prize because he knew he didn't stand a chance. Scratching the back of his neck out of boredom, the boy decides to be brutally honest with his reasoning. Giving him a superior look, our MC destroys his rival's ego, letting him know that even if he beat a small fry, the reward would be practically worthless. Hearing the insult, the gang leader grinds his teeth, feeling his blood boil. Completely furious, the brute calls the rookie arrogant, claiming he didn't know his place on the totem pole. Back at the dungeon entrance, Emma tries to warn her savior that the place was way too dangerous for him. Gripping her staff tightly, she points out the spot required hunters way stronger than the boy's stats. Carefree, the adventurer ensures there was no problem with that because his plan all along was to hunt there anyway. Halfway there, the thug yells out once more, asking if the crazy kid planned on going into the dungeon solo. Mocking him, the rival suggests the loser should recruit some useless members around there since they'd make a perfect match for his weakness. With sharp sarcasm, Alan asks if the big guy was going to use a party, mocking that apparently he couldn't get anything done without a gang backing him up. Taking a hit to his pride, the man clenches his jaw, grinding his teeth in pure hate over the low level's nerve. Turning his back to the fools, the crafter ends the argument saying he couldn't care less that they brought the whole crew. Seeing the boy leave, the priestess runs after him, asking him to wait up, because she was tagging along. Standing right in front of the glowing portal, the MC looks at a holographic screen confirming the party invite. Staring at the holographic screen right in front of him, our MC just stands there in dead silence. Without giving a single care, he already hits the decline button, dropping the truth that he doesn't need her help. Seeing the rejection, the little girl goes into full panic mode, begging him to hold on a second. Clinging to the guy's arm, she begs to tag along, whining that she couldn't just let him go into that place all by himself. Looking right at him, the healer plays up the drama, saying it was her fault, things ended up this way. Slightly annoyed by the situation, the crafter looks away, thinking to himself that this woman was way too stubborn. With a long sigh of defeat, he finally throws in the towel and gives in to her begging. Pointing his finger back at the floating screen, the boy hits the button to accept the party setup. Beaming at the answer, the priestess flashes a huge smile, thanking him endlessly for the chance. From afar in the crowd, one of the adventurers yells out that he didn't give a darn about the rookie, but demanded he keep Emma safe. With his arms crossed, the swordsman smiles in a really gross way, promising his goons they'd have a lot of fun with the girl later. Fully locked onto his goal, Alan ignores the jerks and stands in front of the glowing dungeon portal while the young girl nervously tags along. On the stone steps, the two get ready to cross into the instanced zone. Looking at the sign by the entrance, the adventurer notices the fastest record for the place was 19 minutes and 12 seconds. Confident in his own level, the boy gives a little smirk, thinking that clearing it would be a piece of cake. Getting the green light, the MC announces it was time, and the two step through the glowing portal. In the dark hallway of the wolf mine, the duo is instantly hit with a scary view of the sheer number of enemies. Quickly, a flood of level 20+ monsters starts spawning from the shadows, growling non-stop. Terrified, the healer checks out the swarm, warning that those creatures' levels were insane for them to handle alone. Super chill about all the danger, the crafter guarantees it's no big deal because despite the numbers, they were nothing but a bunch of trash. Glancing over at his partner, he bluntly tells the girl to put her staff away in her inventory, leaving her totally confused. Holding his hand out, the guy explains that since she joined the team, she'd have to put in the work and fight too. Wrapped in a huge blue magic aura, our MC uses his crafting skill right in front of his teammate. With two giant submachine guns in her hands, the priestess lets out a gasp of surprise upon seeing the weapon's insane stats. Amazed by the off-the-charts attack power, she asks what on earth that mystery weapon was. Holding his own piece with style, the adventurer explains it was called a firearm and that he was the only one in that world who could make something like it. With his aim locked straight on the undead horde, he instructs that using it was the easiest thing in the world. You just had to point it at the monster. Without taking his eyes off the target, the shooter finishes the quick lesson, telling her to just pull the trigger. Letting loose a violent spray of glowing rounds, the boy wipes out the monsters, trying to push down the hall. Blown away by the damage, the little ally praises the attack while Alan scolds her, telling the girl to stop slacking and start fighting already. In sheer panic, the young girl squeezes the triggers, shooting everywhere in a wild frenzy that scatters explosive rounds all over the walls. Crying out of fear, the girl tries to excuse herself, screaming her partner's name and saying the weapon was shaking way too much for her to control. Without slowing down, the guy casually explains he made the recoil heavy on purpose so she'd hit the enemies out of sheer panic, even if she sprayed everywhere. In the middle of their crazy sprint through the dungeon, the team leader cuts the chit-chat, announcing they were rushing straight to the boss. In another tunnel of the same mine, the rival swordsman slices monsters in half, showing he wasn't playing around. After sweeping the area with his goons' help, the brute rests his weapon on his shoulders, asking if things were all clear around there. Near the leader, one of the thugs gossips that he was pretty mean with that bet against the kid. Not getting the accusation, the big guy tells his sidekick to stop playing dumb and just spit out what he meant. With a wicked little laugh, the bad guy admits he got caught red-handed by his buddy's sharp eye. Walking through the caves, the group keeps chatting that the rookie shouldn't waste their time, feeling sure he'd never even make it to the end of the dungeon. Between laughs, the goon agrees that even if the kid got the luckiest break in the world and reached the boss, he'd end up biting the dust anyway, praising his boss's cruelty. With a face full of pure sadism, Lucas complains he couldn't choke the rookie out with his own hands, but swears he'd make sure to ruin his life completely. Back to the crazy dash, the duo finally comes face to face with the massive glowing door guarding the deepest part of the place. Checking the holographic timer showing just over 8 minutes, the adventurer celebrates that the run hadn't even hit the 10-minute mark yet. Exhausted, the boy looks back, complaining the time would have been way better if someone hadn't run around like a maniac triggering a bunch of traps on the way. Flashing back to the chaos, our MC pictures the little healer running in panic down the hall, pointing out they'd have finished in half the time. Looking down and dying of embarrassment, the girl apologizes, begging him to cut her some slack since it was her first time doing a run like that. Staring at the system screen, the crafter realizes in total shock he'd leveled up 3 times at once just by sweeping the dungeon mobs. Relieved, she managed to level up just a tiny bit. The blonde takes a deep breath, throwing her hands up to the sky, thankful she was a support focus class. In front of the purple door, the girl jumps with anxiety, rushing her partner to go in already, or else they'd end up losing the bet to the gang. Unfazed by his teammates' rush, the adventurer pushes the heavy doors open, deciding to put an end to the circus once and for all. Pulled inside the lair, the young girl gulps, feeling the heavy vibe of the room closing in. Startled by the sight in the dark room, her big blue eyes go wide, not believing what she was seeing. In the middle of the shadowy hall, two monstrous figures step out of the purple mist, glaring angrily at the intruders. Flashing her sharp claws, the level 25 werewolf queen shows off her golden fur, ready to tear flesh. Right beside her, the werewolf king shows his dark fur and purple eyes with the same menacing presence, thirsty for a takedown. Bummed about facing two massive enemies, the boy points out the problem, complaining his teammate should have given him a heads up about this first clear exclusive double boss. Giving them no room to breathe, the two monsters let out an ear-piercing roar, lunging in a perfect double attack right at the newcomers. Pointing his submachine gun up, the MC gets ready to shoot, while the girl screams in panic as those beasts charge in. Analyzing the problem with ice-cold logic, the shooter thinks to himself that werewolves were super fast and dodged easily, being hands down the worst type of enemy to fight with guns. Barking a quick order, the squad leader tells his partner to buy some time by laying down suppressing fire on the beasts. Right on cue, the healer pulls the trigger, unleashing a curtain of explosive rounds that light up the whole room. Moving at a ridiculous speed, the two werewolves dance through the air, dodging the bullets with flawless jumps like it was nothing. Panicking over the boss's insane agility, the young girl cries out that it was useless to keep shooting because the bullets just flew right past them. Watching the monsters split up tactically, the crafter evaluates their movement, realizing this was going to be a bit of a headache. Heading the other way, he tosses the problem to the girl, telling her to hold off the queen while he dealt with the king. Hearing the crazy order, his partner sprays wildly at the golden wolf, screaming that it was impossible to lock the beast down if the shots wouldn't even graze her. Freaking out watching the monster dodge everything so easily, the healer goes into full panic mode, terrified she'd end up as dinner at that rate. Going for a lethal strike, the golden creature flashes its razor-sharp claws, leaping with everything it had to slice the mage up. While the fight was going crazy on one side, the MC dashes right through the middle of the room to clash head-on with the dark-furred monster. Backed into the stone wall, the girl lets out a high-pitched scream of pure terror, squeezing her eyes shut waiting for her end to come. With a savage charge, the werewolf queen misses her target by a hair, smashing the stone wall right next to the shaking girl's face. Knowing exactly what he was doing, our MC cracks a wide, super confident smile, loving the fact that the beast fell right into what he predicted. Confused, she missed such an obvious hit. The giant wolf growls in anger, trying to unstick herself from the wall for another strike. Surrounded once again by that unmistakable blue energy, the adventurer activates his crafting skill, prepping his trump card to turn the tables. With a quick leap, the MC dodges the dark beast's furious charge while pooling his blue magic energy into his hands. Just as the wolf tries to string together another attack, several magic circles begin to form right beneath the monster's paws. Clenching his fist tight, the crafter commands his special skill to trap the target immediately. Instantly, huge bear traps materialize and snap shut violently, locking the creature's legs in place and causing heavy damage on the floor. Caught completely off guard, both the werewolf king and queen howl in pure pain as their movement is completely locked down by the magic metal. Still shaking from the scare, the healer's eyes go wide, noticing the monsters suddenly stopped attacking. Cool as always, the shooter reminds his partner he already told her he just needed her to buy a little time to set up the trap. Looking at the bizarre sight of the two bosses chained to the floor, the girl is amazed, admitting she had no idea the crafting class could pull off something like that. In his head, Alan is thankful he tested ranged item creation earlier, remembering the time he trapped his two acquaintances in the village the exact same way. With slow, easy steps, he walks up to the werewolf king, who was thrashing around pointlessly on the stone floor. Summoning a glowing pistol in his right hand, the boy comments that a werewolf who can't dodge because its legs are trapped ends up losing its one advantage. It gets reduced to nothing but an everyday monster, just waiting to be taken out. Standing right in front of the defeated beast, the vibe in the huge dark room gets totally tense and dead quiet. pointing the gun right at the beast's face. The MC says a cold goodbye before pulling the trigger. Right after the dust settles, he picks up the huge purple magic stone left by the monster, letting out a long sigh of relief for getting the job done. Turning his head to check on his partner, he notices the rushed movement on the other side of the room, super happy holding 2 pistols. Emma says she also finished taking care of the queen, getting a simple compliment from the boy for a job well done. Immediately, a huge blue holographic screen pops up, congratulating the duo for clearing the dungeon and locking in the time of 9 minutes and 48 seconds as the absolute new record. Pumped up, the blonde tells him to look at the system's incredible time, but the crafter ruins the mood right away, saying he was going to solo it the next day to take the top spot, making the girl call him a meanie. Looking at the big blue portal opening in the middle of the room, the MC declares the job there is done and calls his teammate to head back home. Back at the stone entrance of the dungeon, the boy figures those must be the last enemies, while the healer says thanks for everything. Holding a pink pistol, the young girl is curious about the weapon, and he just tells her to feel free to use it from now on. Nearby, the 2 adventurers hanging out with the gang leader notice the duo coming out and find it weird. They're back in just 10 minutes, figuring they just gave up on the challenge. Joking around, one of them comments that making a run for it while Lucas wasn't looking was actually a pretty smart move on their part. Having zero patience for that small talk, Alan turns to the guys asking what they were babbling about since they had just fully cleared the dungeon. Thinking it was a joke, the goons tell him to knock it off with the obvious lies, promising they wouldn't rat out the escape to their boss and that he could just come clean. Holding his ground, the MC tells them to go check the place's record crystal themselves because their names should be glowing right at the top. Not buying a single word of it, the 2 question this record story, feeling like the joke was getting old. They remind him the rookie didn't even meet the minimum level to enter properly, let alone beat a time using the absolute worst trap class in the entire game. With a mocking smirk, one of the guys touches the stone slab, laughing that something that crazy happening in real life was impossible. Instantly, the panel screen lights up, making the adventurer step back with a totally pale face, completely shocked by the notification. The glowing panel clearly displayed the duo's time of 9 minutes and 48 seconds, leaving the guy stuttering in pure disbelief. Dropping down on his butt, the man breaks into a cold sweat, wondering how the heck that was even possible, while his buddy curls up shaking next to him. Wrapped in his signature blue magic aura again, the crafter steps up, offering a special hint to clear up the nosy guy's doubts. In a flash, dozens of holographic submachine guns start hovering around the 2 guys, with the boy revealing that weapon was the big answer to the mystery. Looking at one of the rifles, the long-haired guy goes into a panic, trying to figure out what kind of bizarre high-level gear that was. After reading the insane stats on the item screen, the other goon yells in fear that 153 base damage points was way too high to be true. Jumping into the chat, the blonde happily shows off her own weapon, explaining that besides being strong, the gear was super easy for anyone to handle. She teaches the basic concept, saying you just had to point it at the enemy and pull the trigger, no secret at all. To prove her point, the healer unloads a deafening spray of explosive rounds into the air, making the 2 men scream in terror, asking her to put the gun away. Cowering on the floor, the guy looks up terrified, begging to know who the heck that kid was and where he came from. Before even getting an answer, the man reaches out his hand asking him to hold on a sec upon seeing the glowing weapons fade into thin air. Surrounded by a massive crowd of adventurers pushing each other trying to get a close look at the magic weapon, the MC simply turns his back and walks away, ignoring the yelling. With a look of pure boredom, he reflects that sticking around dealing with that bunch of extras would just be a massive waste of time. Walking toward the desert, he leaves the shocked crowd behind, going about his business like nothing ever happened. Amidst all that chaos, a mysterious silver-haired woman wearing red quietly watches the MC walk away. With an analytical and super-focused gaze, she burns the boy's face into her memory, realizing right away he was no ordinary guy. A couple dozen minutes later, the cocky Lucas finally steps out of the dungeon portal, celebrating the win and wiping the sweat off his face. His teammate rubs his sore shoulder, bragging that they almost hit the 50-minute mark and the time attack victory was in the bag. Full of himself, the leader orders his group to rest up and get ready to wait for the cocky rookies to come out so they could embarrass them in public. Laughing wickedly, the goons agree that if the duo didn't show up in 1 hour tops, it was because they already became wolf chow in the boss room. Crashing the little party, one of the guys who had just witnessed the historic record gets the boss's attention with a shaky voice. Looking tense and hesitant, he straight up tells him that the bet opponents had already gone home a while ago. Frowning instantly, Lucas grumbles in disbelief, asking what he meant by them running away with their tails between their legs. Forcing a laugh, the brute figures all the rookies' tough talk was just a cheap bluff, and he ended up playing the fool. Shaking his head no, the underling cuts his boss's laugh short, warning him seriously that they definitely did not run away from the dungeon. Not getting any of the conversation, Lucas hears the guy tell him to stop dreaming because the duo actually fully cleared the place. With a dead serious look, the man reveals the two weren't just faster than the veteran group. The reality slowly sets in, and the gang leader asks what he meant by that in a tone of disbelief. Pointing at the stone monument, the guy declares they finished the challenge faster than anyone else in the whole world, leaving Lucas completely outraged, saying it was a lie. Blinded by rage and refusing to accept it, Lucas storms angrily toward the sign, yelling at the top of his lungs he'd never believe such garbage. Slamming both hands hard on the stone pillar, he triggers the crystal system, making the holographic display light up right in his face. The blue glow reflects in the warrior's eyes as he reads the unbelievable time of 9 minutes and 48 seconds, making him mumble in shock that the place took almost an hour to clear. Watching the boss completely frozen from behind, one of the blonde goons steps up, nervously asking what was wrong with the screen. Sweating cold with dilated pupils, the brute repeats over and over that it had to be a lie and there was no way it could be real. Collapsing to his knees on the stone floor, he lets out a roaring scream of pure frustration, unable to handle that crushing defeat to a rookie. Far from there, in a fancy, dimly lit room, a VIP figure settles into his high-end office desk. Hidden in the shadows of the room, the mysterious man holds a classified document while carefully analyzing the fresh intel. The paper showed the exact picture of Alan alongside the stats for his submachine gun, fully confirming the kid was the real deal everyone was talking about. Right then, soft knocks echo on the heavy wooden door, and the man in charge gives the visitor the green light to come in. Covered in a menacing purple aura, an intimidating gray-haired individual with his face fully masked silently steps into the room. With a cold, piercing gaze, the assassin mentions he heard recent rumors about a very special job reserved for his crew. Leaning back comfortably in his armchair, the client confirms the info straight up without beating around the bush. Sliding his index finger over the picture on the report, the figure clearly points out that the ops target was exactly the crafter kid. Looking at the MC's photo, the mercenary cracks a sadistic smile under his black mask, figuring that job seems like a pretty troublesome and fun one to handle. A heavy bag of coins is tossed on the wooden desk, serving as a generous advance for the dirty work. The mysterious client gently slides his finger over Alan's picture, confirming that kid was the primary target. Wrapped in his dark aura, the masked assassin gets the cold, direct order to eliminate the boy, leaving no trace behind. Outside the busy dungeon, Emma is super thankful for everything Alan did for her during the raid. The MC looks back, asking if she really needed to run off like that, offering to help fend off the troublemakers if she needed to. Shaking her head no, the blonde turns down the offer, claiming to be a proud adventurer and that she couldn't rely on him forever. Understanding the girl's firm choice, the boy calmly agrees with his arms crossed, saying goodbye and telling her to take care of herself from now on. Running away excitedly, the healer yells for him not to dare break the new record because she really wanted to leave her name etched in guild history. Flashing a huge smile, she suggests they party up again if they bump into each other, while the system panel officially confirms her leaving the team. A few days after this event, our MC arrives completely alone at a vast isolated desert area to test his new creations in peace. Engulfed by an intense blue magic light filled with virtual code, Alan activates his crafting skill, really hoping his future depended on the success of this new test. Following a loud electrical boom, a massive military tank materializes flawlessly on the rocky ground, leaving the boy pretty pleased with the machine's perfect exterior. Skillfully hopping onto the heavy frame, he decides to immediately check out the inside controls of the armored vehicle. Sitting comfortably in the pilot's seat, the young man inspects the glowing dashboard, confirming the replication of all the internal mechanics was an absolute success too. Looking confidently ahead through the hatch, he gives a clear, direct verbal command for the tank to roll out. The massive combat vehicle stays completely still in the middle of the desert, showing no reaction at all to the pilot's command. With a drop of sweat rolling down his cheek, the MC sighs heavily, realizing the machine obviously wouldn't run without any kind of fuel. Understanding his class, he knew he could forge any solid structure, but amorphous things like electricity and gasoline were completely impossible exceptions to craft. Keeping his cool, he smirks, revealing he actually expected this specific setback and had come up with a great workaround. Right then, he raises his hand, lighting up his familiar blue magic aura, knowing exactly how things worked in the ZFO world. Holding a small glowing magic stone, he explains that these crystals dropped by monsters were constantly converted into general use energy by society. With this brilliant idea in mind, he slots the green core right into the energy compartment on the tank's dashboard. His theory was surprisingly simple, firmly believing that the modern stuff he created should also be able to run using this raw magic energy. Instantly, the tank's heavy metal tracks start spinning wildly, kicking up a thick cloud of dust from the dry ground. The massive war machine finally comes alive and speeds across the desert landscape, letting out a deafening mechanical roar. Pretty pumped about the practical success of the mod, the boy celebrates his discovery with a smile while piloting. But right after, the tank's engine lets out a weak sputter and the machine dies abruptly right in the middle of the wasteland. The dashboard screen lets out a sharp crack, followed by the magic crystal entirely shattering into countless useless pieces. Totally frustrated by the quick failure, he grumbles as he notices the metal giant sucked all the stone's energy dry in a single measly second. Looking at the mess from the top of the machine's armor, the young man concludes in disappointment that he unfortunately still lacked the magic power and crystals strong enough to keep a tank running. Hopping off the useless vehicle, he quickly figures out he'd need top-tier crystals to manage to move a structure of that colossal size. Ready to use his crafting skill once again, the boy decides to try his luck forging a much smaller piece of gear. Since the basic power source concept worked, an intense blue light flashes again, materializing a modern voice-activated tactical recon drone right in midair, hovering in front of him. Smoothly, he pops a fresh, intact magic stone right into the device's small battery slot. Watching the gadget take off and stabilize, the MC wonders out of curiosity how long that makeshift charge would last in the air. Through a simple voice command, he orders the little drone to drastically raise its altitude and start recording the entire sparse desert surroundings. Very pleased with the machine's instant response, he notes the equipment's obedience and agility levels were right on point. While the device buzzed overhead doing its thing, Alan thinks to himself that if he slapped a firearm on it, he could easily use it for combat support. Next, he pulls up a holographic tablet from his skills, deciding to check out in real time what the drone's camera was catching from way up there. The image pops up super crisp on the screen, showing the boy himself from above, pleasantly surprising him with the high recording quality. Suddenly, his expression shifts to pure seriousness as he spots a weird little detail in the corner of the screen, pausing the video right away. Zooming in on the screen, he spots a shady group of hooded figures creeping around the rocks, asking himself who the heck those guys were and if they were spying on him. With an incredibly sharp and threatening look, the young man wonders if those men could be Lucas's goons out for revenge, given the heavy killing intent they gave off from far away. With a magical flash in his hands, the MC summons his submachine gun, deciding to go confront them face to face because he absolutely hated the feeling of being spied on by cowards. Hiding high up on the rocks, the mercenaries noticed the target's sudden movement. Realizing in a panic, he was rushing exactly towards their hideout. One of the purple-haired assassins brushes off the idea of them getting spotted by radar, reminding his partner they were level 65 stealth professionals. The MC casually walks up to the base of the rock formation, loudly calling out the 5 guys trying to blend in up there. Totally freaked out by the boy's insane accuracy, the hooded men freeze up tense right in the rocks. The underling anxiously asks the gray-haired boss what they should do, since the silent strike plan went down the drain, and now all they could do was end him in a direct clash. Looking at the weird gun in the target's hands down below, the mercenary mocks the situation, thinking it's completely impossible for that gear to fire faster than their own speed. Full of arrogance, the leader draws his daggers, stating there was no issue at all fighting out in the open, since the kid's weapon was supposedly harmless against humans. Staring down the enemy squad from afar, Alan taunts them fearlessly, calling the guy a fool for thinking the mission would be that easy, relying solely on a numbers advantage. The boss hides his face behind a dark, psycho smile, ordering his men to get into guard stance because the target was dangerous, despite only being in the level 20s. Standing right on the dirt path, the MC announces in a bored tone he wasn't a fan of playing hide-and-seek, telling the whole gang to step out of the shadows once and for all. Stepping out from behind the rock wall, the gang leader shows himself, sarcastically admitting they got caught red-handed and calling his own squad a bunch of incompetent cowards. Within moments, the 5 assassins line up perfectly on top of the hill, staring down at the lone young adventurer below with weapons drawn. Not wasting time with villain speeches, the boy asks extremely coldly what was the real goal of that group tailing him out there. Giving off a heavy aura of pure killing intent, the masked boss tells the brat to stop staring at them with that cocky attitude. With a sudden, synced move, the mercenaries leap off the cliff, kicking up a dust cloud and screaming at the top of their lungs that they just came to toss his life away. Caught off guard by the enemy's insane burst of speed, the MC's eyes go wide as he sees the entire group vanish completely from his line of sight. Evaluating the critical situation, he instantly recognizes that taking on 5 highly skilled assassins focused on stealth moves would be a pretty tough challenge to deal with. He quickly raises his weapon. Feeling really relieved, he specifically chose to craft a submachine gun designed for rapid-fire sweeps. Popping out of nowhere through the dust, the leader goes for a fatal back attack, calling the boy a fool for trusting his own life to a harmless toy gun. The mercenary raises his blade to deliver the final blow, but gets suddenly blinded by a blinding flash from the dark barrel of the boy's weapon. Without hesitating for a single millisecond, the MC spins around and unloads a merciless storm of explosive rounds straight at the attackers in midair. The multiple shots violently tear through the assassin's gear, blasting them backward with the kinetic force while heavy damage splatters everywhere. With the ice-cold look of an absolute predator, Alan keeps holding the trigger, showing not a single drop of mercy for the men who tried to end him. The Blitz takedown runs its destructive course, brutally riddling the mercenaries full of holes mid-jump before they could even lay a finger on the target. The dust finally settles on the battlefield, revealing the 5 defeated bodies laid out on the desert floor while the shooter stands perfectly intact in his starting spot. Blowing the hot smoke coming out of his creation's barrel, the boy coldly comments that the veterans should have come up with a way better ambush plan before attacking. The Shadow Guild leader down on the ground coughs hard, asking in total desperation why the kid's weapon was tearing them apart if that broke the game's sacred rules. The MC gets the enemy's desperate reasoning, calmly confirming there usually was a safety lock on the system to prevent lethal fire against other people by accident. But he slides his finger, disabling a small mechanical lock on the side of his gun, explaining he turned the feature off on purpose because those guys looked super shady from the start of the chase. With his legs filled with dark holes and taking heavy damage, the mercenary boss hears the terrible truth in a state of pure shock. With a blank look of someone who just cleared out another random roadblock, Alan absolutely decrees that the safety lock was off, and that, as a natural consequence, it was game over for them if they got hit. The injured leader kneeling in the sand just clicks his tongue in pure frustration seeing his team wiped out. Wasting no time, the boy points the smoking barrel of the weapon directly at the attacker's forehead. Looking down coldly, he demands to know the reason for the attack, warning him that he better start talking if he still wanted to keep breathing. Even while bleeding, the gray-haired mercenary replies that their profession was to take out anyone as long as they got paid for the job. The MC questions who the client behind this could be, since he did not remember doing anything to attract such intense hatred. Pondering out loud, the young man comments that maybe he had done absolutely nothing wrong to deserve an ambush, but the mercenary lets out a smirk, explaining that the problem was the boy being way too strong and that there was a big shot who was very bothered by it. Not understanding the meaning behind that, the young man asks who he was talking about, but a cracking sound inside the enemy's mouth interrupts the conversation. Closing his eyes, the masked man apologizes, stating that he was also a professional in the business, ready to take his secrets to the grave. A trickle of blood runs down his mouth as he declares that he could not say anything beyond those vague clues. At that moment, the adventurer quickly realizes the guy ingested a toxin and watches the body fall lifeless to the dusty ground. Walking through the arid landscape, he reflects on the absurdity of someone considering a level 24 player a major threat. Suddenly, a figure emerges from behind the rocks, commenting that turning the tables on veteran mercenaries was not bad at all. The guy turns his face right away, asking who was there and if the person was part of the defeated gang. The mysterious woman steps forward, dismissing the idea with irony and stating that it could only be a joke. Showing off her look with red clothes and silver hair, she clarifies that she was actually much more inclined to be on his side. However, the boy maintains an expression of pure distrust regarding the presence of that stranger in the middle of the desert. The girl then proposes that the two of them form a team, guaranteeing that it would not be a bad deal for him in the end. Promptly, the MC roughly refuses the offer, warning that he did not need companions at that moment, and never would. The memory of the clumsy priestess who accompanied him in the last dungeon comes to his mind, reinforcing his preference for playing solo. Trying to break the ice, the silver-haired woman asks him not to be so prickly and to hear what she had to say. With a secretive tone, she reveals she has a good idea of who the mysterious person that hired those mercenaries was. This information instantly catches the lone shooter's attention, and he turns his face, curious to know the mastermind's name. However, she demands a confirmation before speaking, wanting to be absolutely sure if he really was the so-called Alan who broke the speed record at the wolf mine. Annoyed with the bureaucracy, the young man shoots back, telling her to simply look at the system, pointing out that she herself was hiding her own data. He opens the holographic system screen and realizes he had recently changed the settings because getting famous was a huge headache. The glowing notification confirms that the public display of the adventurer status could be toggled on or off in the options panel. After a few quick taps, he enables the viewing and shows the floating information, asking if the curious girl was satisfied now. Reading the data, the woman widens her eyes, completely shocked to see that the monster responsible for the sweep was only level 24. The guy asks what the problem with the number was, while she confesses that the value was incredibly lower than she had imagined. Still surprised, the warrior thinks to herself that she couldn't see his level from afar that time, but she was certain he would be in his 60s. Getting back to the main topic, the MC demands she show her data since he had done his part of the deal. With a click in the air, she complies and reveals the screen, confirming her name is Melissa, a level 50 glass cannon sorceress. Using the newly discovered name, the young man cuts to the chase and asks again who ordered his elimination behind his back. Playing coy, the girl looks away, stating she would love to tell everything but couldn't give away such valuable information for free. The shooter's gaze narrows immediately, easily deducing that the sorceress wanted to cash in a huge favor in return. She smiles, confirming his suspicion and guaranteeing that if he helped with a quest, everything would be revealed without any extra runaround. Keeping his guard up, the MC asks what kind of help such a high-level player would need. Pointing upwards, the woman directs his attention to a gigantic floating structure way above the mountains. The revealed location was the stunning crystal castle in the sky, a magnificent dungeon recommended for level 50. Soon, the sorceress explains it wasn't an ordinary dungeon and that its difficulty was extremely high, even for her standard tier. Detailing the danger, she warns that the place was infested with an absurd amount of monsters and bosses with totally random spawn rates. Besides the enemies, the castle was completely packed with fatal traps capable of taking out experienced adventurers in the blink of an eye. In the deepest part of the dungeon resided the dreaded Crystal Dragon, a monstrous beast that belonged to a completely different league than normal bosses. After hearing the epic and scary report, the young man asks with a face of pure boredom if her grand plan was simply asking for help to clear that absurd place. To be exact, the sorceress proposes to exchange the vital information only if the boy handed over the exclusive item dropped by the supreme boss, known as the Jade Dragon Orb. The MC quickly analyzes the situation and recognizes that it was a top-tier material, perfect for her class to evolve. Impatient with the silence, the woman in red crosses her arms and asks once and for all if he would agree to the insanity of the challenge. In her mind, she highly doubted a level 24 could survive in there, but she thought it was worth risking the proposal anyway. To her total surprise, the boy accepts the mission right away with a firm answer and without showing a single drop of hesitation. Completely indignant with his extreme confidence, she gestures exaggeratedly, asking if he had heard the part about the dungeon being a highly difficult and perilous area. With extreme calmness, he replies that he knew it very well and that he probably knew the shortcuts of the place much better than the sorceress herself. Secretly, he remembers that he had already crushed that dungeon countless times back when he played in the original virtual world. His logical reasoning makes him quickly conclude that he needed to deal with whoever was on his tail right away so these nuisances wouldn't delay his main journey. Taking the initiative in the partnership, the young man extends his hand in a professional gesture to seal the deal between the two. Turning his back to the battlefield, he says he is eager to work together and decides it was time to head towards the castle. However, the girl puts the brakes on the boy's excitement, warning with a tense expression that unfortunately they couldn't do that at the moment. Stopping in his tracks in the middle of the dry earth, he looks over his shoulder, clearly annoyed, and asks what the new roadblock of the day would be. The temporary companion sighs and explains there were two major barriers, the first being figuring out how to get up to the massive floating fortress. She details that to reach the sky, they needed to submit a bureaucratic request to the kingdom's government and go through a rigorous teleportation ritual. The term brings back memories to the MC, who remembers perfectly how in the old game you just had to talk to a simple, non-playable character to be launched upwards. Bursting the guy's bubble, the glass mage decrees that he did not meet the real-world system requirements to initiate the magical trip. The unbreakable rule required a minimum level of 40 to unlock the transport circle, automatically barring the adventurer who was stuck at 24. Feeling like a clown, he questions the reason for being invited to a locked dungeon, and the sorceress counters in frustration that she would have never asked if she knew about the massive level gap. Letting the indignation pass, the adventurer lets out a heavy sigh and asks directly what the second major problem of that endeavor would be. Resuming her proud posture, the woman replies that it was something very obvious, warning that just the two of them on the field wouldn't be enough to survive. She lists that a proper raid of that scale would absolutely require a heavy defensive warrior, a fast healer, and an extreme damage shooter. The sorceress justifies the formation by stating that her attacks focused on large areas of effect, which made her practically useless for dealing massive damage to a single armored boss. The young man agrees with the duo's strategic flaw, while the mage peacefully suggests that grinding his level should be the priority for the next long 3 months. The mention of such a long deadline ruins the boy's patience, who warns in a serious tone that, unlike her, he was in a massive rush. With blue flames burning in his pride, he silently reaffirms his absurd goal of being the first person in the world to reach level 999. Staring at his partner intensely, he declares that he didn't have the slightest bit of time available to keep tripping over trivial bureaucracy along the way. The sorceress tries to break that childish stubbornness, saying that having big dreams was excellent, but the only logical and safe option was to put in the effort to conventional training until he hit the right mark. Thoughtful, the young man partially agrees that the magical restriction of the ritual was indeed a pain, but completing the dungeon challenge itself was still totally viable for him. Evaluating the distant fortress in the skies, he calculates that the altitude was immense, making the use of flight magic impossible, which soon sparks a bold idea to bypass the situation using his mechanical creations. Looking up, the MC announces that he just had a great idea. With his hand raised, he guarantees they could reach the castle without relying on the teleportation ritual, leaving the woman completely confused. At that moment, the boy activates his creation skill, materializing a glowing blue machine, and says he would test that first. During the flight of the small mechanical tool, he explains it was a magic drone, while the sorceress asks, intrigued, if it ran on energy stones. Ignoring the question, the crafter gives the direct order for the object to fly up to the massive floating castle. Astonished by the scene, the temporary partner is impressed by the machine's obedience, stating that this technology simply did not exist in that world. Following the invention's trajectory, the young man concludes that, physically, the drone was perfectly capable of reaching the fortress without issues. The small machine then gets closer and closer to the immense island of ice suspended in the sky. With his eyes half closed, he comments that the real question was figuring out if there was any kind of protective barrier around the place. Quickly, the device lands safely on the crystal floor, confirming the absence of magical obstacles blocking the entrance. Shocked by the discovery, the girl acknowledges that they really could invade the place without the government system's permission. Soon, she deduces that the boy's plan was to build a giant version of that machine to carry them, and suggests they return to the city to recruit an exploration team. In response, the MC immediately denies the idea, stating that just the presence of the two of them would be more than enough for the mission. The mage widens her eyes and asks, amazed, what they would do regarding the lack of the other mandatory members for the raid. Showing utter boredom, Alan replies that they didn't need anyone else and arrogantly guarantees he could clear all of it even by himself. Taking advantage of her shock, the guy casually adds that he also wasn't going to waste time building any giant drone. To justify it, he explains that the larger the machine, the worse the fuel consumption would be, guaranteeing that a large-scale model would fall before reaching the destination. Completely lost, the silver-haired woman asks what in the world they would do to get up there then. With an unshakable, confident smile, the shooter warns they would use a completely new energy source. Not understanding the concept, his companion just repeats his words, trying to process the unexpected information. Mysteriously, he adds that this fuel would be something totally different from conventional magic stones. Focusing his intense gaze on his partner, he points directly at her and declares that the sorceress would be the energy source. Through a holographic affinity chart, the young man explains that sorcerers controlled various natural elements and that they would use that as an engine, leaving the girl even more confused. Wasting no time with long explanations, the MC activates his skill again, releasing an intense blue light around his own hands. In the next second, a large straw basket appears on the ground, surprising the woman once more with the speed of his creation. With a quick gesture, he calls it a hot air balloon and tells his companion to get in immediately for a practical test. Already inside the basket, the mage asks what she should do and receives the instruction to send gusts of wind to inflate the loose fabric. Using her elemental powers, she creates a strong greenish air current, throwing all the pressure into the top opening. The massive white canvas quickly takes shape, swelling up until it takes on the classic appearance of a giant hot air balloon. Analyzing the result, she asks if this was really how it worked, and the boy confirms, warning that now they needed to heat the air trapped inside. As a suggestion, the crafter explains that any heat source would do and recommends a basic flame spell that consumed little of the user's mana. Understanding the logic of the machinery, the sorceress raises her hand and conjures an intense magical blaze without much difficulty. Satisfied with the generated fire, Alan praises her control and asks her to keep the temperature exactly like that. Slowly, the wooden basket begins to separate from the stone ground, taking flight smoothly and continuously. Startled by feeling her feet leave the ground, the girl loses her balance slightly as the structure floated due to the change in air density. To avoid disasters, the MC warns her not to let the fire go out no matter what, because if the air cooled down, they would plummet to their end. Annoyed by the late revelation, she complains that spending too much mana there would hinder her fighting capability up top, but the boy reassures her, saying he would handle the enemies by himself. Aware of the existing power gap, the woman looks at him out of the corner of her eye and challenges the promise, pointing out that her partner was still stuck at level 24. During the ascent towards the clouds, the mage reflects silently on the absurd feats and revolutionary inventions she had just witnessed. Evaluating the shooter's extraordinary genius, she starts to build sky-high expectations about the success of that completely improbable endeavor. Focused on the final goal, Alan maintains a serious expression, exuding the confidence of someone who would truly destroy that dungeon without breaking a sweat. After a long, intense climb, the makeshift air transport lands perfectly on the glowing ice bridge located in front of the castle's grand gates. As a form of gratitude, the MC praises his companion's work, who was panting from exhaustion after keeping the fire lit without pauses. With the view of the initial hall clear, the young man notices a considerable number of rival teams preparing for the perilous exploration. The woman confirms the crowded environment, explaining that because it was an open dungeon, they would be kicked out of the place if another team eliminated the boss first. Driven by the rush of not losing the ultimate prize, Alan starts running hurriedly, declaring that he wouldn't let absolutely anyone steal his dragon boss. Not caring about the lesser monsters, the MC walks right past the enemies and suggests focusing solely on an uninterrupted advance through the corridors. The sorceress interrupts the boy's run and asks him to listen to the explanation about the castle's structure, divided into 3 main floors. Anticipating the explanation, the boy details the mechanics of the 3 crystals needed to progress, leaving his partner completely spooked by that specific knowledge. Using the very same blackmail tactic the mage had used earlier, he flashes a mocking smile and replies that he would love to reveal the secret of his intelligence, but wouldn't do it for free. Caught off guard by her own poison, the silver-haired woman looks away, a bit embarrassed, and grumbles about the adventurer's extreme audacity. Suddenly, the MC's quick steps are abruptly halted in the middle of the vast crystal hall. Right in front of them, the passage was completely blocked by a group of hunters facing a massive minotaur armed with a giant axe. The terrible monster with dark fur and sharp fangs was known as the Abyss Minotaur, marking the dreaded level 45 in the dungeon system. Aiming to avoid conflict over resources, the sorceress peacefully suggests they look for the crystals on another floor, since there were 7 options scattered across the map. Contradicting the logic of fleeing, the shooter rejects the idea immediately, arguing that the other paths would take too long and that he wouldn't give up on that hunt. Without hesitating in the face of danger, the boy walks toward the commotion, loudly warning that the opposing team was blocking his way. With a posture taken over by arrogance, he suggests the warriors stop stalling the fight and get out of the way once and for all. With his patience exhausted by the provocation, the rival team's leader turns his face, furious, questioning who that cocky brat thought he was. The spiky-haired warrior's anger peaks when he checks the holographic interface and notices the meddler was just a mere level 24. In a tone of pure mockery, the team members make way, retreating from the battle and handing the deadly beast over on a silver platter so the rookie would be wiped out. Not caring about the jokes and ulterior motives, the MC maintains a cold expression and thanks them for their kindness in an incredibly restrained manner. With the new target set, the horned giant raises its massive bloody axe and lets out a terrifying roar capable of shaking the corridor's walls. Desperate with the fatal situation, the mage in red screams for him to fall back, warning that her mana still hadn't recovered from the balloon trip. Maintaining his usual calmness, the boy says the situation was under control and pulls out the powerful red magic stone extracted from the sandworm. In a quick and familiar movement, he activates his crafting panel, enveloping the rare crystal in a dense aura of glowing digital data. In a blinding flash of light, the raw energy materializes, revealing a modified and extremely heavy version of his classic rocket launcher. Positioning the robust barrel on his right shoulder, the shooter checks the system interface and notes with satisfaction that the attack power added to the bonuses surpassed the 30,000 point mark. Consumed by irrational fury, the red monster charges forward, ready to split the young man's body in half with a single brutal strike. Cold and calculating in the face of the charge, the MC merely whispers with a dark look that the battle was already over before it even began. A deafening shot shatters the dungeon's silence, while a whirlwind of flames is violently ejected from the back of Alan's heavy weapon. In the final second before the inevitable impact, the creature's eye widens as it finally comprehends the overwhelming force of that imminent glowing attack. A cataclysmic explosion swallows the entire space, turning the powerful level 45 boss into stardust in the blink of an eye. The shockwave generated by the annihilation is so absurd that the sorceress has to duck to avoid being swept away by the hot windstorm. Likewise, the adventurers who were previously laughing at the boy's audacity are violently thrown backward, screaming in pure panic at that unreal and destructive firepower. As the dust settles, the system interface confirms the boss's defeat, and the MC looks at his glowing hand, satisfied to have reached level 25. Perplexed by the scene, the rival adventurer's jaws drop, questioning how that kid managed to take down the beast with just one hit. Walking calmly through the hall, the young man lets out a light chuckle and praises the performance of his new heavy weapon. Still trying to process what she just saw, the silver-haired woman asks what exactly he did to cause such massive damage. Instead of answering, the boy just reflects to himself, thinking that maybe he didn't even need to use the sandworm's magic stone for that level of enemy. Wasting no time, he approaches the glowing pedestal and collects the first yellow crystal, confirming that now only 2 more were missing. Near the defeated boss's carcass, the shooter announces he will keep the Minotaur's magic stone, while the mage agrees, still half dazed. Driven by the rush to clear the dungeon, he is already running down the corridor, calling his partner to the next challenge, while she tries to keep up with him. With her eyes on the boy's back, the sorceress wonders how a level 24 human managed to obliterate a level 45 boss, remembering that the crafter class was considered useless trash. Soon, the duo arrives at the lower floor of the Crystal Castle, known as the Path of the Abyss, where they find a large hole blocking the passage of other adventurers. Analyzing the map, the MC comments that the next challenges merely require solving some puzzles and that they could collect the items quickly. However, the woman in red points to the abyss ahead, asking how they were going to advance since the path seemed completely cut off. Keeping calm as always, the shooter stares blankly at the dark hole and states that the passage was not truly destroyed. At that moment, a little system ghost appears floating over a glowing grid, explaining that the floor was just invisible and that stepping in the wrong spot would result in a fatal fall. Faced with this perilous challenge, the duo observes the extent of the dark abyss, needing to find a safe way to cross without plummeting. To prove the danger, one of the adventurers gathers his courage and announces he is going to try to cross the empty space. As soon as the man takes his first step into the air, he realizes too late that there was no surface there at all. Immediately, the poor guy plummets into the darkness, screaming in terror while the others watch the fatal drop. Witnessing the tragic fate of the background character, the MC coldly observes that this was exactly what happened to anyone who took the wrong path. Mentally, he calculates that the standard strategy would be to use a long weapon like a staff to feel out the invisible terrain and discover the safe route. However, the young man soon discards this idea, imagining that if he did that, the other explorers would copy him, creating a dangerous pushing match on the edge. Excited by an idea, the sorceress raises her finger, suggesting he use his creation skill to build a bridge once and for all. With a practical look, the boy shuts down the theory, explaining that if that were allowed, someone would have already crossed the hole using flight magic. Challenged by logic, the woman decides to do a practical test, telling him to watch while she extends her hand to conjure a powerful spell. To her total frustration, the energy simply does not respond, and she stands there in an awkward pose without understanding the reason for the failure. Calmly, the shooter explains that magic and skills were restricted in that specific area and confirms that his crafting didn't work there either. Discouraged by the restriction, the mage concludes they were completely stuck, but the MC flashes a confident smile, stating he had a solution. Not understanding where he was going with this, the silver-haired woman stares at him, waiting for the plan to be revealed. In that enclosed corridor on the lower floor, the adventurers remained paralyzed with fear in front of the deadly trap, not knowing how to proceed. Aware that they needed to reach the intermediate floors, the duo prepared to secure the dungeon's 2 remaining crystals. To continue his explanation, the MC highlights that although he couldn't craft anything right at that exact moment, there was a loophole in the rules. To demonstrate the system's flaw, he accesses his inventory, which remained freely available, and materializes a piece of technological equipment with 4 front lenses. Revealing the logic of the situation, the boy explains that he just had to have crafted the item before entering the restricted area, leaving the mage curious about that weird object. He presents the tool as night vision goggles created from the magic stone of an evil bat, guaranteeing that it would reveal the hidden floor. Surprised by the item's usefulness, the sorceress admits it was incredible, but questions exactly when he had the time to build such a complex contraption. Without losing his cool, the guy replies that he made the gear during the trip in the makeshift balloon while she was distracted admiring the scenery. Trying to hide her shock, the woman in red starts to sweat cold, realizing that the rookie knew the obscure mechanics of the dungeon better than she did. With the visor over his face, the shooter explains in detail that the device detected infrared light, allowing him to see thermal signatures. Upon turning on the lenses, the darkness of the abyss transforms into a greenish map, perfectly revealing the winding route shaped like a floating labyrinth. Impressed by the equipment's effectiveness, his partner praises his skill, relieved that they could finally advance without the risk of an untimely end. Without giving any prior warning, the MC grabs the woman by the knees and back, lifting her in a princess carry, which leaves her completely flustered. With a neutral expression behind the lenses, the boy merely replies that he was doing that to save precious time on the crossing. Since he didn't care about the sorceress's high-pitched screams, he takes off running at high speed over nothingness, fully trusting the greenish route he could see. Jostled by the bumps, the poor girl begs him to slow down, but the adventurer just tells her to keep her mouth shut so she wouldn't bite her own tongue. In an agile movement across the invisible bridge, the young man asks her to relax and trust the process, stating that the route was clear as day. On the other side of the abyss, the stalled adventurers watch the scene completely dumbfounded, seeing a man taking huge strides through the void. Unable to properly open her eyes, the mage keeps screaming in panic, pleading with all her might for him to be careful. After a final leap, the duo lands safely on the opposite platform, with the woman complaining to high heaven that he hadn't listened to her. Soon, the two advance through the castle's silent corridors, coming across a fork in the road where the sorceress questions which route would be the real one. Because he knows the map, the MC guarantees that both corridors housed a crystal at the end, causing the mage to suggest a tactical split. Noticing the boy's dark expression, she asks if he was annoyed by something, receiving only a dry order to be quiet as a response. Staring intently at his partner, the shooter confesses that he would love to split up right then, but there was a major obstacle to that. With a defeated sigh, he turns his face and decrees that they would stick together, claiming it would be a huge headache if she were taken out all alone in there. In the back of his mind, the young man coldly calculated that he needed to keep her safe just to extract vital information about the attackers hunting him. Arriving at the area known as the Path of Doom, the two face a narrow corridor filled with giant blades swinging over a blood-stained pit. Looking at the massive pendulum sides, the woman comments that getting hit by that would hurt a lot, and that a fall would mean an instant game over. Wasting no time with crazy plans, the MC pulls out his trusty assault rifle bathed in a bluish aura, stating that the solution was quite simple. Mercilessly, he pulls the trigger and fires precise bursts at the trap's axes, destroying the solid metal blades and opening the way through sheer brute force. Radiant upon noticing the lack of restrictions, the sorceress vibrates with excitement, confirming that she could finally use her magical skills at will. With her hand extended upwards, she conjures a massive reddish magic circle, full of confidence that crossing now would be a literal walk in the park. With a rain of magic and heavy lead, they destroy the remaining obstacles and sprint down the corridor at a frantic and relentless pace. Soon, the duo reaches the precipice room, where they come face to face with an immense glowing rock wall that guarded their next objective at the top. Worried about more lethal traps, the mage asks if there was any hidden danger there, while the boy suggests she simply touch the structure. Following the instruction, she touches the damp surface with her fingers, feeling a disgusting, sticky texture that makes a weird sound upon contact. Disgusted by the slime, the sorceress wipes her hand and concludes it would be impossible to climb that, asking if he could create something to get up without touching the wall. Pleased with his partner's line of reasoning, the MC flashes a smirk, praising the fact that she had finally grasped the versatility of his class. Excited about not having to climb the dirty wall, the woman conjures flames in her hands and tells him to hurry up, assuming the guy would summon the hot air balloon again. With a shake of his head, the shooter dismisses the air transport, arguing that it would be an unnecessary overkill for such a contained space. To the mage's confusion, he activates his creation skill, making the ground glow intensely with currents of bluish digital energy. In a matter of seconds, a robust metallic platform surrounded by safety rails materializes, leaving his partner jaw-dropped at that weird box. Standing before the small control panel, the young inventor presents his newest masterpiece, calling the mechanical structure an elevator. Without needing long magical explanations, he simply presses the glowing green button, activating the modern machine's pulley and gear system. Smoothly, the metal platform starts to rise in a straight line along the slimy wall, with the boy explaining that the invention was meant exactly for transporting loads vertically. In the blink of an eye, the two comfortably reach the top of the precipice, where they find the beautiful blue crystal floating solemnly over a stone pedestal. Delighted by the ease of the ascent, the woman celebrates obtaining the second vital item, reminding everyone that now they only had to retrieve the last piece for success. Right then, the sorceress asks the MC to wait a second before heading to the next objective. Before them stretches the lower floor known as the poisonous swamp room, leaving the woman impressed by the sight. Observing the bubbling liquid, the mage comments that the toxin there was very potent and would cause status issues if touched, questioning why there was a swamp inside a castle. Finding the situation terrible, the silver-haired girl asks what kind of creation her partner would use to overcome this obstacle. With a confident expression, the young man merely lets out a murmur, indicating he already had everything under control. Wasting no time, he activates his creation skill, making his body glow intensely with digital energy. To his companion's surprise, a simple wooden boat materializes in the toxic waters of the swamp. Shocked by the simplicity of the invention, the glass sorceress thinks that it was way too normal, while the inventor merely agrees with the obviousness of the situation. Realizing she thought out loud, the woman gets into the boat and asks if the solution shouldn't be something incredibly mysterious like the previous gadgets. Practical as always, the MC argues there was no reason to overdo it when a simple boat could already do the trick, calling his partner to get on board right away. Already settled in the small vessel, the girl looks around confused and asks where the oars were so they could move. Looking over his shoulder, the shooter explains that this was where teamwork came into play, stating that he was counting on her to be the engine. Not fully understanding the role given to her, the healer repeats the word engine, astounded by the guy's audacity. Because of her powerful wind magic at the stern of the boat, the mage understands that her powers would only serve as the propulsion force for the crossing. Exhausted by the continuous effort, the sorceress complains that the boy was putting the entire workload on her back. In a moment of peace at the bow of the wooden boat, the MC crosses his arms behind his head, enjoying the trip peacefully. Shortly after, the unusual vessel safely arrives at the glowing pedestal on the other side of the swamp. With the purple crystal floating above his hands, the shooter confirms that they now had all the pieces needed to move forward. During the walk, the girl confesses that she thought the mission was impossible at first, but it was surprisingly easy for a duo, while her partner agrees that this was natural. Full of confidence, the young man adds that the success was due to the crafter class being the strongest of all. Calling his companion to continue the path, he walks ahead toward the dungeon's next objective. Staring at her partner's back, the mage reflects silently that the true strength did not come from that specific class. Continuously immersed in her thoughts, the sorceress concludes that the overwhelming strength actually belongs solely to the boy himself. Despite having met only recently, the woman is absolutely certain of something important regarding that rookie. Certain of her intuition, she predicts that the man named Alan would become an adventurer capable of entering that world's history books. A few minutes later, the duo finally reaches the majestic transfer room of the lower floor. With the colored stones floating in his hand, the shooter explains that they just needed to insert them into the mechanism to be taken to the intermediate floors, marking their arrival at the castle's climax. Curious about the flawless navigation, the mage comments that the young man never seemed to get lost, acting as if he knew every corner of that place. With a light sweat running down his face, the MC covers up the truth, stating that he literally bet his life on that information. Without further explanation, he perfectly fits the 3 crystals into the pedestal slots, activating the ancient machine. Immediately, the system authenticates the items and envelops the 2 adventurers in a massive column of light to begin the teleportation. Upon arriving at the entrance to the intermediate floors, the duo comes across a gigantic swirling blue portal in front of a stone door. Analyzing the structure, the inventor finds it weird to have a portal inside another, remembering that that specific area functioned as an instance dungeon. To make it easier to understand, the boy compares the situation to a matryoshka doll, leaving his partner confused about what that otherworldly object could be. To wrap up the explanation, the shooter promises to craft a real doll for her if she remembered it after they conquered the castle. Focusing his attention on the immense dimensional door, the MC calls the girl to enter the new area. At that moment, the sorceress asks her partner to wait a bit, grabbing his attention before they move forward. With a confident posture and her hand on her chest, the mage proposes a friendly competition between the two before facing the real challenge. Surprised by his companion's sudden attitude, the inventor raises an eyebrow and asks what that bet was about. With a focused look, the silver-haired girl confirms her intention to challenge the rookie. In the detailed rules, she points out that the gathered information indicated the intermediate floors were divided into 2 distinct sections. When describing the first floor as an area crowded with lesser monsters, the MC merely agrees that the intel was correct. With a small flame summoned at her fingertip, the woman suggests they use the battle's kill counter to see who could eliminate more enemies. Quickly, the young man points out that those victory conditions seemed heavily skewed to favor her combat style. As a legitimate glass cannon sorceress, her class specialty was entirely based on spells with immense destructive area of effect. On the other hand, the firearms crafted by the artisan were tools purely focused on taking out single targets with precision. Due provocation tactics, the mage asks if her partner was afraid of losing to her magical abilities. Willing to prove her worth, the woman warns she would show the true power of her class, proving she wasn't just good for being a boat motor. With a dark and determined look, the adventurer thinks to herself that she would force the genius boy to acknowledge her strength in combat. With his usual calmness, the shooter accepts the challenge, realizing the competition would help clear the floor much faster. To seal the deal, in front of the shimmering portal, the MC decrees that the loser would be forced to buy a high-quality potion for the winner. Immediately, the duo crosses the portal and appears on the first intermediate floor, coming face to face with an immense horde of monstrous creatures. Clustered in the vast room, the dark monsters roar fiercely upon noticing the presence of new prey. Without hesitating for a single second, the mage in red positions herself in front, preparing her initial spell. Right behind, the inventor just observes his partner with half-closed eyes, awaiting the result of that display of power. At that exact instant, the system panel appears in the air, informing that the first trial required the elimination of 1,500 monsters in total. By concentrating an immense amount of mana, the sorceress begins to chant her mortal spell, commanding the enemies to turn to dust in the night. Through the devastating black nebula magic, she unleashes a crushing explosion that swallows dozens of creatures all at once. Proud of her own destruction, the woman brags about her incredible area-clearing ability, receiving a sincere compliment from her partner. Facing his turn, the MC reaches his hand out into the void, preparing to pull out his answer to that destructive spell. To start his turn, the boy materializes a gigantic heavy minigun with an impressive 500 damage points, 300 ammo, and auto-reload. With a cold look focused on the monster horde, the shooter yells for the enemies to swallow that rain of lead. Immediately, the metal barrel starts spinning at high speed, firing a continuous torrent of bright, deafening bursts. Without any chance of defense, the dark creatures are brutally torn in half by the relentless impact of modern artillery. In a matter of seconds, the battlefield turns into an inferno of violent explosions, decimating the front line of the enemy army. In shock, the mage wonders what kind of insane weaponry that was, possessing a fire rate totally out of reality. While holding the weight of the machinery, the MC explains that despite the movement restrictions, the weapon was elite for area clearing, suggesting she just give up already. As if refusing to surrender, the silver-haired woman intensifies her own magic, declaring she would never be outdone in her specialty by another class. 2 minutes later, the system scoreboard confirms the young man's overwhelming victory with 811 takedowns against her 689, leaving the sorceress exhausted on the arena floor. Devastated by the humiliation, the healer mutters in disbelief at having lost in the exact and only area where she was supposed to be the best. To console his partner, the inventor comments that the match had been close, asking her not to be so discouraged by the loss. Turning his back to continue the rout, he calmly adds that the girl just had the bad luck of picking the wrong opponent to challenge. Still lying on the floor, the mage reflects on the rookie's words, having absolute confirmation that he was an anomaly in that world. Without interruptions, the duo penetrates the second intermediate floor, where the local boss room awaited them. With a focused expression, the MC guarantees that after this victory, only the crystal dragon would remain, marking the moment to capture the highly desired miracle orb. Impressed, the mage comments that the dungeon felt way too easy while by his side, even though it was a maximum difficulty location for their level. With a serious look, the MC focuses his attention on the corridor straight ahead. Staining in the darkness, the inventor warns that the enemies were already approaching. Suddenly, a gigantic crystal ogre appears riding on the back of a bestial manticore, emerging from the shadows. Immediately, the system panel confirms that both monsters were level 50. Worried, the sorceress realizes the duo would use coordinated attacks and that they needed to find a way to separate them. With a confident smile, the guy disagrees, activating his creation skill without blinking. With a new heavy weapon in his hands, he states he would simply blow them both away at once using a rocket launcher. Surprised, the silver-haired woman recognizes the equipment that had annihilated the lower floor boss in an instant. Upon closer inspection, she notices the lack of attached modifications and asks if that wouldn't make the attack weaker than the previous one. To explain the situation, the shooter confesses he went overboard on firepower that time and that the current version used standard specifications. Mentally, he reviews that weapons fused with magic stones disintegrated after use, while normal creations only broke when they ran out of ammo. With a fierce roar, the monstrous duo charges forward with everything they have toward the adventurers. Facing the colossal charge, the partner warns about the imminent approach of the enemies. Keeping his usual coolness, the MC instructs the mage to freeze the ground immediately. Confused by the sudden request, the girl just nods and fires her magic at the floor. In a matter of seconds, a thick layer of ice spreads across the entire path ahead of them. Calculating the situation, the inventor assesses that the manticore's speed was slower than a werewolf's, but its evasion was extremely high. To get around this problem, he decides to force the creature into a position where dodging would be totally impossible. Stepping on the slippery floor, the bestial beast leaps high to avoid the frozen terrain. Watching the prey in the air, the young man smiles, satisfied that his plan had worked flawlessly. He quickly deduces that without wings, the enemy would have no way to alter its trajectory or use its mobility while airborne. Without hesitating, the shooter fires the powerful explosive projectile straight at the vulnerable target. For the first time, the monster duo realizes the imminent danger flying in their direction. In a desperate maneuver, the ogre uses its own mounts back as a springboard to jump out of the blast zone. Shocked by the scene, both adventurers realize the rider sacrificed the beast just to save itself. Immediately, the rocket hits the manticore dead on, generating a colossal explosion in midair. With a piercing look, the MC notes that such a level of intelligence and movement was something completely impossible in the original game. Under the smoke, the crystal giant descends in freefall, delivering a crushing blow with its glowing club. Looking up, the inventor realizes he wouldn't have time to react to that lightning-fast strike. With the monster falling straight towards him, the shooter remains motionless under the shadow of the giant weapon. Desperate, the mage screams for him to run, warning that her spells wouldn't be enough to stop the blow. With his back to her, the young man shows no sign that he was going to back down. In panic, the sorceress remembers that the rookie's level was incredibly low and that a direct hit from the boss would take him out instantly. Driven by instinct, the woman in red jumps in front to take the impact in his place. The glowing hot club cuts through the air with full force, inches away from crushing the target. Mid-jump, the girl realizes in horror that she wouldn't arrive in time to intercept the monster. With a macabre smile, the creature prepares to savor the human's demise. The crushing weight of the weapon approaches the MC's head in a lethal manner. Seized by absolute terror, the partner screams the inventor's name with all her might. The fateful moment seems to freeze in time before the devastating attack. Despite the situation, the boy displays a calm smile, reflecting that the enemy's evasive maneuver had been a huge surprise. At that exact millisecond, a mechanical click echoes, announcing the automatic reload of the heavy weapon. Staring the beast down from below, he concludes that this entire scenario was still exactly within his calculations. With a point-blank shot, the shooter engulfs the crystal giant in a second monumental explosion, obliterating the boss mid-air. Hit by the shockwave, the sorceress shields her face without understanding absolutely anything of what had just happened. Amidst the thin smoke, the MC lets out a long sigh of relief. Seeing the panel confirming his level up to 26, he comments that the outcome was already expected. Still processing the miracle, the mage questions how that was possible since the weapon was supposed to be empty. In an educational manner, the inventor explains that unlike the fused creations, that rocket launcher had an auto-reload function upon emptying its ammo. Falling to her knees, the girl breathes a sigh of relief, while her partner admits he narrowly avoided a grim fate if the process had been delayed. Recovering her posture, the woman notes his absurd calmness for someone who almost lost his life, receiving as a response that that second shot was already part of the plan. While the young man picks up the red jewel left by the boss, his partner reflects on how he was always one step ahead of everything. Storing the item, the shooter announces that from that moment on, all that was left was to face the dreaded crystal dragon. With a look of pure admiration, the adventurer recalls several fighters who based their victories purely on brute force. However, she is absolutely certain she had never met someone with the same competence and composure as that rookie. With a serious expression, the sorceress concludes that this absurd genius was the exact reason dangerous people wanted to eliminate him. Right after, the duo arrives before an immense, majestic gate, marking the final entrance to the upper floors of the castle. With her hands on the heavy stone structure, the mage announces the start of the final battle, pushing the doors open with force. Taking short steps, the inventor realizes the doors were purely decorative, while his partner freezes in confusion, looking at the empty room. Standing before the hall, the woman explains that this floor was supposed to have a teleportation system, but the portal was nowhere to be found. Analyzing the situation quickly, the young man deduces that the absence of the passage meant another group had already entered the location. Surprised by the conclusion, the sorceress asks in perplexity if there really would be other people challenging the dungeon. Because of the memory of the mercenaries who tried to take them out, the MC confirms the suspicion without blinking. Worried about their progress, the adventurer warns that if the enemies defeated the creature first, they would lose all the effort of that climb. Settling calmly on the stone floor, the inventor asserts that panicking wouldn't help at all, suggesting they formulate a strategy while waiting. Regaining her focus, the mage reveals that the crystal dragon possessed an instant takedown attack, leaving her partner impressed. Facing his surprise, the silver-haired girl clarifies that the opponent belonged to a rare epic class, She details that epic creatures were one tier above ordinary bosses, possessing unique traits and vastly superior stats. To make matters worse, the informant explains that besides the fatal strike, the monster also had an absurd damage limit cap. Illustrating the problem, the rule was clear, as any attack that exceeded 100,000 points would be completely nullified by the creature's system. With a dark look, the adventurer concludes that all of the shooter's devastating firepower would be totally useless under those conditions. Reflecting on the heavy restrictions, the MC agrees with the difficulty of the challenge and asks what his role in the plan would be. During the instructions, the mage reports that the main hall would spawn infinite waves of lesser monsters until the primary threat went down. Decisively, the boy instructs his partner to focus solely on clearing out the lesser enemies, guaranteeing with a serious look that he would handle the epic dragon personally. After understanding the instructions, the sorceress asks how he would deal with the fatal attack, and soon the guy asks her to just hide behind him on his signal, promising he would figure something out. Standing before the immense blue portal, the mage deduces that the lack of a forced teleportation out of the castle meant the previous group's battle had already ended. With a grim face, the MC concludes they were all wiped out and that fleeing the boss area would be impossible once they entered. Visibly nervous, the girl reflects on the defeat of skilled adventurers and fears they too were victims of the instant takedown attack. Calmly walking past his partner, the inventor guarantees everything would be fine, as victory would be certain as long as they followed the strategy strictly. With a firm look in the shooter's direction, the woman reaffirms that she was placing all her trust in him. Without hesitating, the young man returns the look and takes responsibility for the situation, asking her to leave everything in his hands. As they cross the glowing passage towards the unknown, the MC sets a personal goal to absolutely not meet his end before becoming the first level 999 in the world. The scenery opens up, revealing the grand and frightening arena of the upper floors of the Crystal Castle. The vast circular structure floats in the void, filled with crystalline fragments floating around the stone bleachers. Upon stepping on the icy floor, the duo comes across a true sweep staining the floor of the main hall. Faced with the several fallen bodies scattered about, his partner comments in perplexity about the grim number of victims left at the scene. To maintain focus on the objective, the shooter calmly warns that they didn't have time to be scared of that sight. At that exact instant, a dense and dark energy begins to form, revealing huge crystalline claws emerging in the center of the arena through blue flames. With the creature's manifestation, the adventurer screams, warning that the enemy had finally arrived for combat. The imposing crystal dragon descends from the skies with its immense body winding through the air, illuminating the darkened arena. With a deafening roar, the system confirms the identity of the fearsome epic class creature stationed at level 50. Faced with the overwhelming presence, the sorceress breaks a cold sweat as she stares at the majesty and absurd level of the monster. Taking the lead, the MC instructs his partner not to let herself be intimidated by the crushing pressure of the environment. As predicted by the prior intel, several bestial figures emerge from the shadows with eyes glowing red and blue, proving the boss wasn't alone. The epic dragon lands violently on the ground, sending a shockwave through the hall while its troops advance on the flanks. With his massive minigun in hand, the inventor leaves the lesser enemies to his partner, who promptly accepts the mission. Wasting no time, the shooter fires an endless rain of heavy bullets towards the main monster. The projectiles hit the crystalline scales, generating successive fiery explosions all over the giant beast's body. From analyzing the impact, the boy confirms that the weapon's rapid-fire rate was the perfect answer to bypass the enemy system's strict damage limit. Impressed with the firepower, the woman praises her ally's ability to corner a boss of that level so easily. With a calculating expression, the MC acknowledges the trouble the dragon would cause, but guarantees that knowing the enemy's tricks allowed them to keep the advantage in combat without fear. In the middle of clearing out the monsters, the mage averts her gaze, noticing with surprise that an unusual sound was echoing behind her. While she blows up the minions with magic attacks, the inventor abruptly stops his barrage when a hollow metallic noise takes over the rotating mechanism. Seeing the barrels stop spinning, the shooter realizes with frustration that his primary ammo had been completely depleted. In that opening, the immense creature cranes its neck towards the top, while a sinister energy begins to gather around it. Due to the sudden change in posture, the MC widens his eyes, understanding exactly what was about to happen in the next second. Immediately, he yells for the mage to fall back, warning that the dreaded instant takedown attack would be fired at them. With devastating power accumulated, the dragon throws its jaws wide open, revealing a condensed spear of black and purplish flames. The flame of the dark end is fired with full force, melting the very air itself, while the girl screams her partner's name in despair. In a fraction of a second, the inventor slaps his free hand against the arena floor, activating his ultimate creation skill to generate a defense. A gigantic and thick wall of technological metal rises from the ground, forming a solid wall between the duo and the lethal attack. Hiding behind the structure, the shooter explains he designed a flame-resistant shield because the fatal strike wouldn't have an effect without direct contact, making his partner finally understand the genius of that wall. Waiting for the end of the blast, the boy plans to counterattack as soon as the minigun finishes reloading and the defense absorbs the impact. However, the continuous strike pushes the metallic plate to the extreme, and thick cracks start to spread, making the sorceress scream about the imminent breach. Completely in panic, the adventurer murmurs that the barrier failing wasn't part of the strategy's initial plans. Seeing the metal giving way, the MC admits with a sharp look that he overestimated the durability of his shield against an attack of that colossal caliber. On the other side of the protection, the epic beast intensifies the destructive breath even further, pushing the mechanical defense to its absolute limit. Unable to withstand the temperature and pressure, the immense shield shatters into thousands of pieces, leaving a clear path for the flames. In calculating his next step, the inventor concludes that raising another fire-resistant wall would be useless since the first had failed, requiring him to find a totally different method in milliseconds. With their defenses shattered, the mortal burst of flames advances mercilessly toward the duo, now totally exposed on the arena floor. With their eyes closed and cowering before the light, the mage awaits the imminent end, calling for her partner one last time as the attack approaches. Far from accepting defeat, the shooter's face takes on an expression of pure fury and determination in the face of a certain downfall. Refusing to lose his life in that place, he extends his glowing hand and activates his creation, forcing out every bit of energy he had. Amidst flashes of blue digital light, a sturdy red fire extinguisher materializes perfectly in his hands. Opening her eyes in a cold sweat, the silver-haired girl is completely dumbfounded, questioning what kind of bizarre object had appeared there. The crimson metallic cylinder shines imposingly, with a huge magic jewel encrusted in the center of its reinforced body. In a quick reflection, the inventor justifies that this equipment was the first and most obvious idea that crossed his mind when thinking of something to put out flames. To guarantee the item's maximum efficiency, he reveals he had fused the object with the magic stone of a crystal ogre, being the most powerful material in his vast inventory. Taking a step forward to face the destructive power, the MC wonders privately if that absurd idea would actually work in practice. Through gritted teeth, he decides to bet his entire life on his own peculiar crafting skill, stating there was only one way to find out the result. With the hose pointed directly at the dark magic, he squeezes the trigger, furiously commanding the monster's fire to disappear. A colossal blast of magic pressurized foam erupts from the nozzle, spreading a white flash to meet the lethal attack. Shocked by the unbelievable scene, the sorceress realizes that the newly created substance was colliding with and repelling the dreaded dragon's breath. The overwhelming magical pressure from the modified extinguisher violently pushes the flames back to their source, nullifying the enemy's advance right in front of the monster's fangs. The powerful jet of foam continues sweeping the center of the arena with a relentless force, completely dominating the dark attack. With a firm grip on the equipment, the young man yells at the top of his lungs, forcing a constant output of all the magical charge accumulated in the blue stone. The thick whitish cloud hits the scaly creature's own face, brutally suffocating the source of the breath. In a gigantic visual spectacle, the famous epic class instant takedown attack ends up completely neutralized and dissipated into the air without leaving a trace. Still trembling from the near-fatal situation, the adventurer demands to know what the true nature of that miracle extinguisher was. Over his shoulder, the inventor responds with an absurd calmness that the tool wasn't a weapon, but an item true to its own name, made exclusively to put out fires. At that moment, the familiar sound of gears locking echoes from the reloaded minigun attached to his body, and the shooter announces the end of the crisis, ordering an immediate counterattack. Back in an offensive stance, he pulls the heavy weapon's trigger with gusto, restarting the merciless rain of lead against the stunned target. The hundreds of bullets pierce the crystal giant's scales, making the enemy's massive health bar plummet in a matter of seconds. Excited by the major turnaround, the sorceress quickly advances up the arena's steps, confirming that the continuous damage strategy was a success. Cornered by the heavy fire, the epic dragon writhes in deep agony while the entire stone scenery shakes around it. Focused on ending the combat quickly, the MC tells his partner to ignore the remaining lesser monsters so that together they could finish off the immobilized boss. Without hesitating at the command, the mage nods firmly and already concentrates her mana, forming a gigantic red magic circle in the air. Giving no quarter, the shooter relentlessly unloads the rest of his ammo, melting the monster's vitality to well under half. Thanks to the synchronized combination of the girl's explosive seal and the guy's piercing barrage, a crushing detonation consumes the dragon, mercilessly lowering its immense energy bar to a critical fraction. With its health reduced to 0, the immense crystal dragon starts to crack and shatter into thousands of floating fragments. A colossal explosion of bluish light takes over the place, confirming that the epic beast had finally been taken down. Thanks to this victory, the system notifies that Melissa went up to level 51, while Alan reached level 27, and he notes that it was simpler than expected, questioning the reason for the girl's previous panic. Walking toward him, the silver-haired mage replies that the earlier despair didn't matter as long as they had secured the victory in the end. Wasting no time, the MC crouches on the floor, picking up the magic stone left by the creature. Seeing this, the sorceress tells him he could keep the rock, but soon asks about the whereabouts of the valuable jade dragon orb. With his eyes fixed on a glowing energy forming, the inventor points ahead, indicating that the item was right there. In front of them, a large ornate chest materializes, and the girl explains that this always happened after defeating the boss, approaching to check the contents immediately. Upon opening the lid, an intense pinkish glow reveals the desired orb floating majestically, classified by the system as an epic-grade material. Amazed by the treasure in her hands, Melissa expresses her total disbelief at the fact that just the two of them had managed to clear that absurd dungeon. At that exact moment, the shooter's expression darkens and he tells his partner to stop immediately. Holding the jewel, the adventurer turns her face, completely confused by the sudden interruption. In a serious tone, the young man explains that as soon as she grabbed the item, the clear would be considered complete and the system would automatically teleport them out of the area. Still not understanding where he was going with this, the mage asks what the big problem was with that. Immediately, the MC pulls out his weapon, demanding if she had already forgotten the terms of cooperation they had agreed upon before entering there. With the barrel of the pistol pointed directly at her, the inventor demands to know who sent those mercenaries on his trail. Sweating cold in front of the equipment, the girl agrees that this was the deal, but politely asks him to lower that first. With a tired sigh, Alan yields and lowers the pistol, agreeing to hear the answer calmly. Maintaining a sharp gaze, he waits for his partner to start speaking about the mastermind behind that attack. Relieved to no longer be in the crosshairs, the sorceress relaxes her shoulders, trying to regain her posture. However, she turns her face away and confesses that she actually didn't know exactly who the person behind the attack was. Hearing this blatant lie, the MC's face contorts in pure fury and impatience. The next second, he steps forward and presses the weapon against her head, making the mage panic and beg for him to hold back. Desperate, she raises her hands, justifying that she had a general idea of which organization was involved, asking him not to be so hasty. Hearing that there was at least one concrete clue, the young man slightly pulls back the threat. He decides to give her a chance, stating he would listen for now, but if the information was useless, he wouldn't let it slide. With that, he demands to know which organization ordered his end and asks if it was a specific clan. Shaking her head, no. Melissa reveals that the threat was something much bigger than a simple group of warriors. Maintaining an air of mystery, she warns that it was an institution he was already quite familiar with, being the Adventurers Guild itself. Faced with this unexpected revelation, Alan's eyes widen in total shock. Unable to believe it, he immediately questions why the Adventurers Guild would want to eliminate him. Calmly, the sorceress points out that there wouldn't be any problem if he were just an ordinary adventurer. Maintaining eye contact, she highlights that his true flaw was that the boy proved to be way too strong for normal standards. This sentence makes the inventor recall his past battles, realizing that the leader of the mercenaries had said the exact same thing. In his mind comes the memory of the hitman declaring that there were big fish who didn't want someone so powerful popping up out of nowhere. Returning to reality, Melissa reinforces that he was absurdly superior to anyone else at his level, and that at this rate, he could end up defeating the Demon King. While the image of the dark beast illustrates the situation, the girl explains that certain people inside the guild simply didn't want that to happen. The reason was simple, because if the Dark Lord fell, the world would be at peace and the mercenaries would become useless, resulting in the complete dissolution of the organization. Understanding the corrupt logic, the MC concludes that they were taking out promising talents just to protect their own positions, and his partner confirms the theory. Despite this, the mage clarifies that only a small remnant faction within the executives thought in this radical way. Being very practical, Alan asks who the leader of this criminal group was, believing that if he crushed the head, the problem would be totally solved. Waving her arms in denial, the adventurer replies that the biggest hurdle was precisely the unknown identities of those members. She details that this faction had no alliance with the enemy army, so they never committed direct or obvious sabotage. Furthermore, their network of influence extended to merchants, tavern owners, and anyone whose financial status depended on continuous warfare. Scratching his head in annoyance, the inventor realizes that trying to track down everyone involved would be an endless and highly exhausting task. Looking at the castle in the distance, he understands that the treacherous methods used in the last attack pointed straight to that faction inside the guild. Determined, he states he doesn't care who was to blame, because he wouldn't forgive anyone who got in the way of his leveling, and soon asks how the other targets dealt with it. The young man's focus was to understand the security measures taken by other people who were also under constant threat. Coughing slightly, the girl in red reminds him that technically she herself was one of those promising people who could be targeted. Realizing the tactlessness of his previous question, Alan just clears his throat and decides to change the course of the conversation. In silence, the shooter adopts a deadly look as he begins to formulate plans and defenses against future attempts on his life. Suddenly, the sky clears up around the castle, catching the attention of all the local warriors who are startled by the teleportation magic. Seeing the magic circle appear out of nowhere, the people question in shock if someone had actually defeated the dragon. Amidst the beam of light, the duo descends to the ground, surrounded by onlookers who watch the scene in total amazement. The global system announces the victory of Alan and Melissa, leaving the crowd perplexed by the fact that a team of just 2 people had completed the absurd challenge. The veterans quickly recognize the powerful high-ranking sorceress, but are completely lost, trying to identify the young man next to her. Away from the crowd, Alan casually comments that it was time to head back to the base city. However, the mage points out that she couldn't use the return ritual due to level restrictions and asks how they would get down from that insane altitude. With his typical confidence, the inventor guarantees there was no problem at all, as he just had to create a parachute to solve the situation. Before they could act, the locals spot them and start running towards the famous silver-haired heroine. Surrounded by the curious crowd, the warriors confirm that the young man near the sorceress was indeed the Alan mentioned on the victory board. Everyone begins to congratulate Melissa on the achievement, exalting that clearing that dungeon with just a duo was an absolutely legendary feat. Noticing the commotion, the MC comments ironically that she was a real celebrity, validating the claim that she was also at risk. Pressured by her fans, the girl is bombarded with anxious questions about how she had managed to conquer that impossible castle. Asking everyone to calm down, the adventurer raises her hands, declaring that she wasn't the most incredible person on that mission. Pointing straight at her partner, she proudly reveals that the true person responsible for the raid's success was him. Immediately, the crowd scans the boy's level, going into shock upon seeing that he was just a level 27 crafter, considering it total madness. At that moment, the inventor notices the high levels of the warriors around them, noting that there were many potential buyers with high purchasing power there. With a marketing plan in mind, he thinks that this would be the perfect opportunity to promote his modern weapons and make a huge profit. Excited, the girl praises the insane versatility of her friend's inventions and suggests he show his wonderful creations for the public to test. However, the memory of the secret faction that eliminated prodigies invades Alan's mind, causing his gaze to turn ice-cold instantly, and he whispers an immediate refusal. Stepping back a few paces, he tells the mage to stop with the praises, suddenly adopting the posture of a weak and useless cowardly crafter. Completely lost by the drastic change in attitude, Melissa stammers while the boy yells for everyone to hear that the boss was defeated solely by the girl's brute force. With his back to the crowd, he raises his hands in surrender, blatantly lying that he was only brought along to deal with the easy traps and that he would have been taken out in the first second without her flawless protection. Not understanding the terror he felt about sudden exposure, the sorceress just calls his name while a drop of sweat runs down her face at that bizarre and exaggerated performance. Seeing the sorceress's astonished reaction, the MC merely looks away while his mind works fast. He concludes that drawing too much attention now would only make his leveling much more difficult, deciding to leave the distribution of his weapons for another time. Catching on to the play, the silver-haired girl narrows her eyes, understanding the situation. Quickly, she deduces that the boy didn't want to draw the attention of the guild's secret faction, which was why he was tossing all the credit for the victory onto her shoulders. Meanwhile, the crowd keeps cheering for the adventurer, exalting her magic, beauty, and humility as something top tier. Completely awkward, the mage seriously asks the people to stop with the uproar. Looking at the floating castle in the background, she confesses that she basically just tagged along for a ride during the whole mission. Soon, the scene shifts, showing the grand royal capital with its beautiful buildings under the orange sky. Walking down the streets, the adventurer announces she was heading to the guild to trade in her magic stones and asks what the shooter's next steps would be. Peacefully, the young man replies that he would head straight to an inn to change classes and use his own stones to craft new gear. In a joking tone, the sorceress concludes the two would split up for the day and teases that it must be really hard for him to be away from her. Without giving him much thought, the MC just says a dry goodbye, causing the girl to complain about the direct and cold way he acted. Placing her hand on her chest, the heroine in red reflects a little and realizes why that attitude bothered her so much. Turning around, the boy mentions that he had already gotten the item he wanted from the castle, while she had only provided very vague information about the guild. Bothered by his undeniable logic, the mage grumbles that she hated the fact that this sounded so unfair on her side. Standing before the great walls of the capital, she states she didn't want to owe him anything and promises to investigate the mysterious faction as much as she could. Pulling the responsibility onto herself, the adventurer asks the boy to leave everything in her hands and just wait for news. With a determined look, she suggests they go hunting together again in the future, guaranteeing that next time she would be the one to carry the team. Hearing his partner's confident promise, the inventor lets out a light laugh, showing approval. Thus the two finally say goodbye, wishing each other safety as they take separate paths through the city streets. Watching the young man's back walk away, the mage thinks to herself that she still couldn't believe everything that had happened. Her gaze reflects pure shock upon remembering that she, of all people, had been completely carried by a mere level 27 artisan. With a small sphere of fire appearing in her hand, the sorceress wonders if she could reach a power similar to his if she fully mastered her own class. Suddenly, a strange and dangerous sensation gives the heroine chills, making her quickly look back. Scanning the busy street, she immediately notices intense hostile intent coming from somewhere nearby. From the shadows of an alley, a masked hitman aims a lethal arrow at the back of Alan's neck, causing the girl's eyes to widen in alarm. Wasting no time, the enemy shooter releases the bowstring, firing the mortal projectile at high speed. Seeing the arrow slice through the air towards her unsuspecting partner, the mage reaches out and desperately screams his name. Alerted by the sudden warning, the MC calmly turns his head back, noticing the imminent attack. With absurd reflexes, the young man just raises his hand and deflects the lethal projectile with a crisp strike without the slightest effort. Hidden by the roof, the masked attacker backs away startled, unable to understand how his surprise attack was cancelled so easily. The adventurer runs to the site of the attack and reports in frustration that the criminals had already fled the area. Stopping next to the inventor, she checks if everything was all right, mentioning that it had been a very close call. With a light sigh, the young man admits he didn't expect to suffer an attack in broad daylight inside the royal capital. The sorceress notes that the enemies were getting desperate and warns that at this rate he couldn't walk around alone, offering help to deal with those mercenaries. With a scowl and clicking his tongue, the MC ends up accepting to test her suggested method, even against his will. Seeing the opening, the girl places her hands on her hips and proposes protecting him personally, as long as he paid a proper price. Dry as always, the shooter refuses the offer right away, claiming that sounded way too expensive and that he would handle the situation himself. Disappointed by the immediate rejection, the adventurer tells him not to do anything crazy and reinforces that she would be available in case anything happened. With a teasing flair, she points to herself, making it clear he had a strong ally nearby. Surprised by the sincere words, the guy stares at her face while his partner justifies her attitude, reminding him that they were now members of the same party. Looking away, the inventor just shakes his head and mutters that it was no big deal, frustrating the mage's curiosity. In a more serious tone, the silver heroine warns she wouldn't forgive him if he ended up being taken out by some random mercenary, since she had finally recognized his strength. Without losing his unshakable posture, the young man guarantees he wouldn't meet his end, no matter what, at least not until he reached the dreamed maximum level of that world. Satisfied with the answer, the girl says goodbye once more and goes her way through the bustling city streets. Now alone in the middle of the street, the MC feels the breeze hit his face as he reflects on the recent events. In his mind pops up the memory of the old virtual reality game, where he always focused on leveling alone because he found it much more practical and without the burden of carrying newbies. Recalling the recent battles alongside his new partners, he admits he thought he would be a lone wolf forever, but ends up realizing that having companions wasn't so bad after all. With a long sigh, the young man cracks a slight smile and acknowledges that those sentimental thoughts definitely didn't suit his personality. Focused once again on his goals, he resumes walking, determining that his absolute priority at the moment was to solve the problem with the Shadow Guild. The next morning, the inventor is seen walking peacefully through the capital's commercial district under a clear sky. Given the situation, he thinks to himself he never imagined having a reason to visit a place like that, but circumstances had forced the necessity. Stopping in front of a huge and imposing stone building, the shooter stares at the location's facade. The red flag hanging at the entrance reveals he had arrived at the city's famous clan association. The narrative flashes back to the previous day in the hall of the Crystal Castle, right after the duo had defeated the Great Dragon and started debating defense strategies. During the conversation, the mage in red states that the fastest and most efficient way to protect himself against the constant hitmen would be joining a clan. Confused by the sudden suggestion, the young man repeats the word, showing little interest in joining large groups. The adventurer tries to explain that these organizations were formed by warriors, but is quickly cut off by the guy, who points out he already knew the basics on the subject. With his skeptical tone, the MC questions how exactly shoving himself into a guild would help him deal with stealthy mercenaries. Through a visual analogy from the animal kingdom, the sorceress explains that targets who traveled in a pack had a much lower chance of being attacked, proving there was safety in numbers. To complete the idea, she strongly recommends that he join a large-scale organization, since those groups usually had very strong political connections. With the information in mind, the inventor reflects on this direct link to the people who ran the city behind the scenes. Suddenly, he remembers the glasses-wearing supervisor from the Adventurers Guild, recalling that the suited man had already mentioned his preference for specific clans in the past. Returning to her reasoning, the girl concludes that associating with one of those guilds would allow him to secure his physical safety and still gather useful information simultaneously. Back in the present time, the guy walks through the double doors, officially entering the grand lobby of the clan association. With a watchful eye on the bustling environment around him, he begins to wonder what the correct procedure would be to find exactly the type of organization he needed. Amidst the crowd, some veteran warriors quickly recognize the artisan's face, whispering among themselves about the fact that he was still unaffiliated with any group. The chatter grows as the onlookers comment that the boy had already become quite a famous figure among the general category adventurers. The shooter's fame was primarily due to the absurd fact that he had completely shattered the time record in the Wolf Mine dungeon using unknown equipment. The rumors continue spreading across the hall, with people shocked to confirm that he was the legendary artisan who had cleared the floating castle the day before. Not caring about the admiring whispers, the MC turns his attention to the building's layout, noting there were service counters separated by categories. Through an illustrative panel, the system explains that a clan's type defined its main goal, like those exclusively focused on conquering and clearing dangerous dungeons. The explanation continues detailing other categories, like social defense, gathering, and subjugation, besides the general clans that operated on multiple fronts without specific restrictions. Evaluating the lines scattered around the hall, the young man quickly realizes that the categories focused on direct combat were the most sought after by local warriors. Refusing to be influenced by trends, the guy goes his own way, muttering that the popularity of those groups made absolutely no difference to his real plans. Suddenly, someone grabs our MC's attention, asking if he was looking for a clan. Looking over his shoulder, the shooter questions the stranger's identity with his usual dry tone. The spiky-haired man introduces himself with a confident smile, stating he is the leader of a rank B conquest clan called the Gazelles. With his hands on his hips, he reveals he had heard rumors that the boy was an incredible artisan and invites him to lend his strength to the team. The young man listens to the proposal in silence, keeping his usual unshakable expression. At that moment, a blond man with crossed arms butts into the conversation, advising the inventor not to waste his time with conquest clans and suggesting general ones to gain more experience. The newcomer introduces himself as the leader of the rank B General Clan Tigers, guaranteeing they would welcome him with open arms. Annoyed by the interruption, the Gazelle's leader steps forward demanding an explanation, while the artisan simply watches the commotion brew. The argument soon attracts the attention of several people in the hall, who start whispering about the fight over the famous artisan named Alan. One of the onlookers even finds the sudden interest weird since the MC's level was super low, deducing he must be hiding some impressive secret. The chatter spreads and quickly a crowd forms around the guy, figuring it wouldn't cost anything to try and recruit him too. A red-haired girl pulls his arm, arguing that her rank A clan was the best choice because it had many members and promising a very tempting experience. Exhausted by all that yelling, the shooter lets out a sigh, asking everyone to be quiet for a second. Turning his back to the crowd, he politely thanks them for all the invitations received. Right after, he throws a bucket of cold water on the whole group, stating he was only interested in defense clans of rank A or higher. In shock, the clan leaders repeat the boy's requirement, not understanding why he would want an organization focused on defense. Unbothered by their reactions, the inventor merely confirms that this was his absolute condition. In his mind, he analyzes that defensive organizations had direct connections with the government and local lords, making it the perfect setting for gathering intel. Furthermore, he figures that under the excuse of providing defense, it would be much easier to distribute his firearms to the cities. To top off his reasoning, a rank A clan would provide the perfect political cover he needed so badly. With an intimidating look, the MC warns he would not negotiate anything beyond what he asked for, telling everyone who didn't fit to step back immediately. Frustrated by the arrogant refusal, the recruiters click their tongues in disappointment. The crowd quickly turns around and leaves, leaving the shooter isolated in the middle of the lobby. Watching the hall empty out, he notes that folks gave up much faster than expected, realizing soon there would be no one left. Suddenly, heavy footsteps approach, and a deep voice comments that it seemed everyone else had failed the boy's requirements, except him. The young man raises his head and immediately asks for the identity of the newcomer who had just approached. An imposing man wearing heavy armor and a blue scarf introduces himself amicably as Flynn, displaying his incredible level of 378. With a confident smile and a scar on his face, the warrior reveals he is the master of the rank A defense clan called Holy Guardian. The MC's eyes narrow, impressed to finally bump into a player with such an absurd level in that world. The veteran asks if the artisan was sure of his choice, warning that unlike the other types, his clan had strict discipline and offered no special treatment. To make things easier, the big guy suggests he join just for an initial trial period, making it clear it would be easier to leave if he had regrets. Seeing the practicality of the offer, the inventor readily agrees, stating he would love to join under those provisional conditions. The clan master nods, fiddling with a system panel in the air as he points out that compatibility among members was very important. A blue screen blinks in front of the MC, displaying the official invitation to join the Holy Guardian with options to accept or decline. Without hesitating, the boy presses the confirmation button and the system registers his official entry into the guild. With a firm handshake, the veteran welcomes the new member, while Alan gives thanks for the opportunity. Immediately, the blonde knight turns around and asks the guy to follow him to the guild's base, where they could discuss the details calmly. Soon, they arrive at the Holy Guardian headquarters, which turns out to be a huge and elegant 3-story mansion. Once inside the leader's private office, the master positions himself behind his solid wood desk, ready to start the official conversation. With a more serious tone, Flynn asks if the recruit perfectly understood what the function of a defensive organization was. The shooter answers immediately that their main mission was to travel to villages and cities in order to intercept the Demon King's army. Satisfied with the answer, the big guy confirms and starts explaining the internal rules, revealing that they operated exclusively in groups of 3 people with similar levels. Surprised by the info, the artisan questions the need to form teams, directly asking if he couldn't operate solo on the missions. Keeping a calm smile, the leader denies the request, stating that this was unfortunately impossible within that clan. The MC's eyes darken right away as he concludes that being tied down to a team full of rookies would completely hold back his level progression. The knight continues the explanation, informing that due to the boy's low level, he would only be put in charge of patrolling the city for now, frustrating Alan, who considered patrols to be just a useless walk. The young man realizes he wouldn't be able to level up at all doing that, and would still remain vulnerable to attacks from mercenaries on the streets. After finishing the lecture, the master asks if the boy had any questions, receiving only a thoughtful silence as an answer. The inventor concludes mentally that he couldn't work under those conditions, but quitting now wouldn't solve his security problem either, nor would it help his goal of distributing weapons. Seeing the rookie's prolonged quietness, Flynn stares at him with curiosity, asking if there was something wrong with the established rules. With a resigned sigh, the MC lowers his head, realizing his only alternative would be to force a direct negotiation. Breaking the silence, he tells the master that he had no questions, but rather a special request, catching the veteran off guard. Determined, the shooter makes it clear he had absolutely no interest in doing patrols and demands to be placed directly into real defense missions. The clan leader looks down and politely refuses the request, reinforcing that as long as the boy was under his wing, he'd have to follow the group's rules. The young man replies that he already knew that, but proposes a bold deal, asking for an exception to the rules if he managed to prove his true strength. The big guy raises an eyebrow, intrigued by the rookie's confidence, and asks how exactly he intended to do this demonstration. The MC raises his hand and proposes something simple, challenging the master to a duel where victory would guarantee his spot on advanced missions. Flynn's eyes gleam with intense energy as he lets out an excited murmur at the audacity of the low-level rookie. Maintaining his calm posture, the knight praises the artisan's enthusiasm, stating he admired all that courage. Despite the compliment, the veteran gives an awkward smile and ends the subject, declaring that unfortunately he couldn't accept the challenge. The shooter frowns instantly and questions the reason for the refusal, since it made no sense for the leader to run away from a contest. Without losing his calm, the master answers sincerely that a duel would bring absolutely no benefit to him. The veteran advises the boy to participate in normal activities for a week before thinking about taking on dangerous missions of that kind again. The young man accepts the decision, grudgingly, reminding himself that this was just a trial period and he could bail whenever he wanted. He concludes mentally that continuing to argue with that stubborn guy would be a complete waste of time. Suddenly, a knock sounds on the door and the big guy announces that the visitors had arrived, leaving the inventor confused. With an amused smile, the knight reveals that those people would be the NC's teammates. The wooden door slowly opens while a youthful voice asks for permission to enter the master's office. The artisan turns his face toward the entrance, wondering who the supposed partners accompanying him would be. Flynn does the honors, introducing the newly arrived duo named Naokyu and Hina, revealing that both of them use the Lancer class. The spiky-haired guy shows off his level 55 as he greets the rookie with a smug smile. By his side, the level 40 girl waves amicably, saying it was a pleasure to meet him. A dark aura takes over the MC upon realizing he'd have to carry exactly that kind of inexperienced adventurer. He immediately deduces that due to the level proximity rule, those two must be the weakest members of the entire rank A clan. Wasting no time, the bold Lancer points his finger at the inventor, questioning the master if that weak, low-level boy could really handle the job. Hina quickly asks her partner to calm down, warning him that it was a very rude way to speak. With a calm smile, Flynn explains that the rookie's level might be low, but apparently he was very famous on the streets. Surprised by the intel, Naoki questions if that was really true, while Alan stares at them with his typical apathetic expression, hearing the veteran grumble about how weak level 27 was. Suddenly, the Lancer widens his eyes noticing the guy's class and comments that the artisan job was awful. The girl's eyes sparkle with curiosity as she wonders if he could be the famous artisan everyone had been talking about. Not understanding a thing, the spiky-haired guy asks his friend which boy she was talking about, while the MC just observes the scene silently. Excitedly, she reveals that he was the guy who had cleared the crystal castle in the sky yesterday alongside Lady Melissa, leaving Naoki completely shocked, trying to picture a low-level artisan doing something impossible. Flashing a proud smile, the guild master nods, crossing his arms and asserting that it was quite impressive. Curious, the shooter asks what they meant by all that amazement and if they didn't know him too, drawing an awkward laugh from the big guy who quickly apologizes for the misunderstanding. The young man explains there was a crowd gathered at the clan association and he just took a peek out of curiosity. Then Flynn started declaring his recruitment requirements, and in the end, only he was left. He adds that even so, the leader still allowed his entry into the clan, which made him think that an adventurer getting so much attention must be extremely talented. Kina clasps her hands in awe and asks the boss if they really could form a team with someone so incredible. Sweating cold out of anger, Naoki grumbles that the rookie probably just leached experience from the mage, since someone like her could surely clear the dungeon by herself. The MC recalls that Melissa had called herself a rising star and concludes she was telling the truth, while the Lancer remains annoyed, asking if he knew the celebrity. Pleased with the interaction, the leader smiles, suggesting the three go out on a hunt right now so they could better understand each other's skills. The rookie duo immediately accepts the idea, with Naoki shouting that it sounded great and Hina agreeing enthusiastically. Unexpectedly, the arrogant Lancer grabs the inventor's shoulder, warning that if he wanted to admit he was weak, this would be his only chance. Our MC looks out of the corner of his eye, finding it extremely annoying that this guy was picking a fight for no reason, and decides to just flatter him a bit to get it over with quickly. Keeping a serene expression, he agrees with the guy, praising the sharpness of a veteran for seeing right through his charade and confirming that Melissa completely dominated the castle by herself while he just supped up the experience. The spiky-haired guy flashes a smug smile, exclaiming he already knew the whole truth. Full of himself, the veteran pats the shooter on the back, telling him not to sweat it and to leave everything to the elders, while Alan mentally notes that now he could treat them casually. The group heads towards the mansion's exit, with the Lancer saying goodbye to the master, who advises them to be very careful. Alone in his office, Flynn lets out a sigh and laughs at the boy's terrible lie, because at level 27 it would be impossible to even reach the flying castle, let alone clear it. The knight reflects on the matter, concluding he had no idea what method the boy used, but an adventurer capable of making the impossible was definitely no dead weight. Walking through the shadows of the train forest, the Lancer asks the rookie if he knew anything about that place, with a recommended level of 35. Unfazed, the inventor answers that he knew absolutely nothing, while remembering he used to avoid that area in the game because the experience points were garbage compared to the level requirement. Taking the lead, Naoki explains there were monsters called trants that mimic trees, and without a detection skill, it was impossible to tell who was an enemy or not. Hearing this, the guy stares at the group, asking if the two Lancers didn't have detection magic, and offers to craft some items to help in the search. Annoyed by the suggestion, the partner tells him not to underestimate them, guaranteeing the tree monsters were no threat at all, and Alan just goes along with the answer. Suddenly, the shooter's eyes widen as he notices something moving in the darkness around them. Two huge red eyes glow intensely in the woods, making Alan warn his partners to watch out on their left. A level 35 monstrous tree emerges, roaring and charging at the group, spooking the spiky-haired guy who quickly gets in front. Hina pulls out her weapon, ready for combat, while her partner yells to check if she was all right. Showing all his confidence, the Lancer confirms he is ready for the battle. The wooden abomination lets out a frightening scream as Naoki calls for the girl to attack, and she immediately agrees. Baring its sharp teeth, the monster lunges violently at the young adventurers. The two Lancers run forward, gripping their weapons firmly in perfect sync. They deliver a coordinated attack, aiming straight at the creature's thick trunk. The impact of the spears hits dead on, pushing the beast backward with the force of the blow. Watching everything from a safe distance, the shooter concludes that this was how a typical adventurer moved. Proud of his performance, Naoki turns his face, flashing a cocky smile and telling the rookie to observe their incredible teamwork. Without showing emotion, the MC simply agrees, saying it wasn't bad, completely crushing the expectations of the guy who was hoping to be called the best ever. The girl scolds her partner, telling him to focus on the fight since they needed to finish the monster off. Quickly, The veteran turns his attention back to the enemy, confirming they would land the final blow. The train prepares for another brutal charge, while the two lancers get ready to end the confrontation. A shadow of concern crosses Alan's eyes as he notices several strange movements happening in the gloom of the forest. Suddenly, several tree monsters appear from all sides, completely ambushing the careless adventurers who are paralyzed with fear. Taking a step forward, the MC casually tells the newbie that now it was his turn to try attacking, guaranteeing he would cover them if anything went wrong. A sharp smile appears on the boy's face, finding the situation quite comforting, and he decides it was time to act. Extending his hand forward, he activates his crafting magic, generating intense blue energy in his fingers. In a matter of seconds, an immense and heavy minigun materializes in his hands, bathing the area in a technological light. Completely bewildered by the scene, the lancers stare at the bizarre equipment, stuttering as they try to understand what on earth that was and if it actually worked as a weapon. While the creatures run towards him, the inventor thinks he could identify them easily if he attached a thermal sight. However, with a cold and merciless look, he concludes that it wouldn't make a difference if he simply annihilated everything in front of him. Without hesitating, he squeezes the trigger, unleashing a storm of fire and bullets that lights up the entire forest in a deafening flash. The rain of projectiles tears through the monstrous trunks, wiping the trees out of existence before they could even react. Scared by the destructive spectacle, Naoki and Hina stand slack-jawed, letting out exclamations of pure shock at that overwhelming power. The trail of destruction rips through the forest floor, leaving a path of scorched earth and pulverized monsters all around. Turning his face with a sarcastic smile, the shooter informs his veteran that he managed to handle the problem smoothly. Shaking from head to toe, the spiky-haired guy forces a terrified smile, while the girl beside him goes into a state of total shock. Trying to recover from the scare, the girl praises the boy's work, calling it incredible, while her partner stammers, pretending it was just a decent job for a rookie. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoes through the destroyed environment, drawing the attention of the whole group. The MC's face darkens right away upon hearing a familiar voice announcing he had finally found him. A frightening figure begins to emerge from the thick mist, staring down the inventor from across the clearing. Slowly, the man walks towards them, showing a threatening posture with his hands in his pockets and an aura of elimination. With wide eyes and an insane smile on his face, Lucas greets his old acquaintance, saying it had been a long time. The artisan merely shifts his body, maintaining his expression of total boredom in the face of the swordsman's threat. Totally uninterested, the boy asks who on earth that guy was, infuriating the big guy who tells the bastard to stop joking around. Completely humiliated by being forgotten, the bully loses it, screaming if he really dared to say he didn't remember the great warrior. A long, awkward silence dominates the place until Lucas demands some answer, complaining it was shameful the way the brat broke his record at the wolf mine and telling him to stop messing with his face while the Lancer duo watches the drama from afar, dying of fear of that madman. Pointing at his own chest, the swordsman tells the rookie to take a good look at his current level, wanting to show off his superiority. The MC racks his brain, recalling the day he bumped into the cocky guy in the dungeon, remembering perfectly that the guy should only be at level 65. Seeing the opponent's attention drawn to his attribute screen, the blonde flashes an evil smile, pleased to be noticed. Alan turns his back, analytically commenting that it had been only a week since that fateful day, and his level had jumped quite a bit. Staring at the system coldly, the shooter concludes that according to the rules of that world, that progression rate was absurdly efficient. Yelling, the big guy states he did all that just to have the pleasure of defeating Alan in combat. With his usual calm, the MC replies that this wasn't an instance dungeon, asking how exactly he planned to settle things since they couldn't compete for clear time. Pulling his heavy sword from its sheath, Lucas warns he wouldn't do anything boring like that and that they would have a one-on-one duel right there. Standing somewhat sideways, the shooter finds this idea of a solo duel weird and asks what had happened to his companions. Flashing a wicked smile, the swordsman shamelessly confesses that he simply ditched those useless guys along the way. Revolted by the attitude, the girl points her spear, accusing the guy of playing dirty by challenging someone of a clearly lower level to direct combat. Unleashing a scary aura, the bully tells the meddlers to shut up, making the rookies cower in pure fear. To magical energy, Alan materializes a pistol in his hand, agreeing that anything works but warning that he didn't recommend direct confrontation as it gave him too much advantage. The big guy talks back, telling the boy not to act tough because he already knew the secret behind that bizarre weapon very well. He explains he threatened the folks at the wolf mine to discover that the equipment was powerful against monsters, but completely useless against humans. In a mocking tone, the blonde sticks his tongue out, suggesting the artisan craft a sword if he really wanted to have any chance of beating him. Wasting no time with the chatter, the shooter just raises his arm and pulls the trigger, firing the weapon precisely. The projectile rips through the air, passing millimeters from the swordsman's face and tearing off a piece of his ear. A spurt of blood splashes into the air as the bully howls in pain, holding the stinging wound. Holding the smoking pistol, the MC apologizes for the inconvenience, warning him that his intel was a little outdated. Fallen to the ground, the big guy goes into total panic, screaming about what the heck was going on, while the inventor merely downplays the situation, calling it a simple scratch and promising to hit him right in the head next time. Pressing on the bleeding wound, the guy breaks a cold sweat, trying to process the humiliation he had just suffered. Quickly, the coward retreats, running into the bushes and warning that he would let it slide this time. But the boy should remember that face. Totally impressed, the Lancers watch the scene, unable to believe he had scared off a level 75 guy so easily, while Alan thinks to himself that he wasn't too sure if he would remember that pathetic guy. Blushing with admiration, Hina praises the attitude, thinking it was all very cool, and catching the attention of her jealous partner. During the walk through the forest, the shooter mentions that now they only had to defeat the Trank King in the deepest part, while the veteran comments that the boy was much stronger and they might end up relying on him. The girl agrees happily, saying she always thought artisans were weak, but they could be incredibly strong depending on how they were used. She continues stating that despite the quirks, that was the perfect class for him, causing Naoki to ask out of nowhere why she chose to be a lancer. The spiky-haired guy sweats cold and grits his teeth, desperately thinking the rookie would end up stealing his friend right in front of him. Bothered by the situation, he turns to the MC and bluntly asks if he happened to have a girlfriend in his life. Suddenly, the inventor tells both of them to stop walking for a second, startling the duo, who take a huge fright on the trail. Assuming a defensive posture, the veteran pulls the girl down and points his spear, complaining about the unnecessary scare and telling the rookie to pay more attention to their surroundings. Ignoring the complaint, the shooter announces they would have an important strategy meeting right then, leaving the guy confused as he thought they didn't need something like that. With an authoritative tone, the artisan simply orders the guy to come to him, forcing him to approach with a grumpy expression. The two step away a bit, going into the bushes and leaving the girl behind without understanding anything, while she complains that all three should participate if the topic was indeed combat tactics. With a more serious expression, the Lancer listens to the MC reveal that the so-called meeting was just an excuse invented to get the girl away. With a focused gaze, Alan states he had something extremely important to tell him in private. In a sudden movement, the veteran bows exaggeratedly, begging the rookie to keep his hands off his friend, catching the shooter completely off guard. He justifies his attitude by saying the two were childhood friends, but he harbored feelings much bigger than that, while the inventor stands there without understanding the dramatic turn of the conversation. Raising his flushed face, the young man confesses he is madly in love with her, and that it was a huge problem if the team member kept standing out so much. The artisan merely lets out a long sigh at that unnecessary romantic revelation in the middle of a hunt. Without a single ounce of patience for drama, the boy thinks he didn't want to waste time on that and that it would be much more practical to simply help the two get together once and for all. Turning his attention back to the partner, the inventor tells him to relax, guaranteeing he had not the slightest interest in romance and offering to help him win her over, leaving the blonde shocked by the proposal. Right after, the shooter details that they would put on a little show of heroism in the fight against the boss, which was just a few steps away, sparking the veteran's curiosity about the plan. Exuding plenty of confidence, the MC instructs that he would face the creature totally alone at first. The guy protests immediately, warning that with the rookie's tremendous attack power, he wouldn't even have a chance to act before the beast met its end. Astute, the artisan explains he could adjust the firepower of his weapons through restrictions, guaranteeing he would lower the force to fake a struggle, thus opening the perfect window for the Lancer to finish the monster off and play the hero. Observing the beast's silhouette in the dark, the inventor analyzes that the trained king's weakness was mobility, so they just had to run around and attack to win, without much trouble. Overcome by emotion, the spiky-haired guy hugs his colleague, calling him the best guy in the world, while the MC coldly asks to be let go as soon as possible. With the plan set, the group resumes walking together under the forest light, with the veteran overflowing with excitement to defeat the creature quickly. A colossal and terrifying level 35 tree appears before the adventurers, revealing its form as the area boss. Staring into the monster's 3 glowing red eyes, the lancer stammers, impressed by the absurd size of the target's bark. Taking the lead of the group, the shooter announces they didn't need any elaborate plan and tells the duo to fall back to a safe distance. While the girl watches everything very apprehensively, the veteran whispers to his ally that he was counting on him, but asking him not to overdo the light show. The guy keeps his gaze fixed on the beast, anxiously awaiting the exact moment he was supposed to shine. Reaching out his hand, the MC activates his crafting magic, materializing a floating cube of blue energy. The magical light transforms quickly, revealing a modern tactical assault rifle perfectly built in his hands. Evaluating the glowing equipment, the artisan reflects that he reduced the power as much as possible without being able to zero out the damage, hoping that tiny flaw wouldn't ruin the act. Excited about the novelty, the girl points and comments joyfully about the great variety of different weapons her colleague carried with him. Ready for action, the shooter positions the rifle, explaining quickly that the new tool had less firepower than the minigun, but offered much lighter handling. Without further ado, he initiates combat, firing a continuous burst of light against the giant wooden abomination's body. The magic shots hit the creature's hard face, generating several bright sparks from the strong continuous impact of the bullets. Noticing something wrong with the dynamic of the fight, the girl widens her eyes, extremely confused, asking them to hold on a bit. Totally panicked, the lancer shouts that the attack wasn't having any visual effect and desperately asks if the rookie had messed up the weapon settings. Like a true impatient hero, the veteran rushes forward, running with his spear in hand, telling him to leave the rest to him and completely ignoring the warnings from his friend who tried to stop him. Showing off fake confidence, the guy smiles, assuring his partner that everything was under control and asking her to just watch his spectacular display. Despite all the boasting, the girl remains paralyzed with a look of extreme shock, foreseeing an imminent disaster. Taking an acrobatic leap, the lancer breaks through the low smoke of the battle, gripping his weapon with both hands ready to strike. With blood in his eyes and pure adrenaline, he lets out a fierce yell, preparing the force of his most fatal blow. The piercing attack descends with gravity in its favor, aiming to tear the bark of the massive monster hidden in the dust. Watching the action from afar, the girl praises in delight the incredible protective attitude of her teammate. With his classic look of insurmountable boredom, the shooter mentally mocks his colleague's confidence, thinking it would take a while, but everything would work out in the end. Landing with style on the grass, the veteran brags about his own skill, agreeing without modesty with the praises received from his beloved. Staring the titanic creature down up close, the adventurer provokes the wood monster, asking what was wrong with all that useless size. At that exact instant, a thick, thorny root sweeps the ground at high speed, whipping and firmly grabbing the boy's left leg. The expression of pure arrogance vanishes instantly from his face, giving way to an empty, terrified look. With a violent pull on his ankle, the poor guy is hurled upside down, flying far through the air like a discarded rag doll. Desperate at the tragic scene, the girl tries to scream her friend's name, reaching her hand out to try and grab the air around her. A drop of sweat runs down the artisan's face as he mentally wonders if that guy was actually serious with that absurdly pitiful and humiliating performance. Showing that the true battle was just beginning, the wooden monstrosity emerges completely from the dust, with its huge red eyes glowing intensely in the gloom. The thud is ugly when the lancer hits the ground on his knees far away after being thrown by the creature. Faced with this tragic scene, the girl stands with a look of pure shock, while RMC just watches the disaster unfold in total silence. Sweating cold and terrified by the monster's brute force, the young man widens his eyes and lets out a roar of pure despair that echoes throughout the area. The crafter pulls out his magic-loaded rocket launcher, honestly reflecting that the previous performance had been pretty hard to watch. Wasting no time, a colossal shot creates a devastating fiery explosion that lights up the entire dark forest. The strong shockwave hits his 2 companions, who try to shield themselves from the intense flash of the detonation. Amidst the smoke, the Lancer coughs, pretty bruised up, while the boss's green magic stone falls to the ground right next to him. With enviable calmness, the MC approaches holding the crystal and asks if his companion can stand up, while the system notifies him that he had leveled up to level 28. Completely in awe, the girl stammers, asking if the rookie had really just defeated the Trank King with a single strike. She runs over excitedly and grabs the shooter's arm, asking what kind of weapon that was and how he had done that. The veteran watches the scene with a mix of frustration and pure anger over having his spotlight stolen. Consumed by his wounded pride, the spiky-haired guy tells the rookie to back off, claiming he had the situation totally under control. Maintaining his usual calm, the inventor simply agrees and apologizes for his mistake, while the girl scolds her partner, reminding him that when someone saves your bacon, the right thing to do is say thank you. The poor guy just stands there covered in bruises, taking a barrage of insults from his crush, being called a fool and a slowpoke. Embarrassed by the whole thing, the girl turns to the MC, profusely apologizing for her friend's extreme rudeness. Deep down, the crafter actually gets where the Lancer is coming from, wanting to look cool in front of the girl he likes so much. Going back to praising him, the Lancer girl points out that the shooter is amazing because even though he had a little trouble at first, he managed to take down the creature super easily in the end. Hearing the girl of his dreams fawn over another guy, the veteran cries his eyes out in the background. Faking modesty, the shooter lies, saying that was only possible because his partner had already cornered the monster beforehand. Pretty surprised, the girl asks if the big guy had actually done that, while the rookie confirms it, saying he just delivered the final blow and that the victory truly belonged to his companion. Getting arrogant again, the Lancer agrees, oozing confidence, and saying that even though he messed up a tiny bit at the start, he had practically won the fight already, and the crafter just got in the way. The MC just lets out a long mental sigh, already tired of all that dramatic acting. However, the plan backfires when the girl ignores the veteran and goes back to flattering the inventor, praising how humble, mature, and cool he is. Totally charmed, the Lancer girl suggests the two of them could go out for a bite to eat once they got back to town, so she could get to know the rookie better. With that brutal rejection, the spiky-haired poor guy's soul straight up leaves his body, leaving him completely frozen. Walking back through the forest, the crafter strolls next to the girl who is dragging her partner's paralyzed body, while the hero thinks this whole situation is just one massive headache. Now back at the clan association headquarters, the trio reports to the master's office. Sporting a huge smile, the imposing warrior with the blue scarf asks how the rookie did on his first mission. Super hyped, the girl reports that he was incredible, taking down the boss with an explosion, and to top it off, easily chased away a level 73 swordsman who tried to pick a fight. Immediately, the shooter remembers the arrogant guy he had run into at the wolf mine the week before. Intrigued by the description, the big guy figures the swordsman could only be that guy Lucas and asks if the kid knew that troublemaker. In response, the leader explains that the mercenary had already caused trouble for guild members in the past, so they ran a background check on him back then. To play it safe, the master advises the rookie to simply drop the clan's name if that jerk ever bothers him again, since that would avoid unnecessary headaches. Analyzing the info, the hero mentally concludes that this was the real intimidating power a high-level clan possessed. Satisfied with the outcome, the big guy smiles in relief, stating that the most important thing is that everyone is safe and sound. The leader congratulates the trio on a job well done, and the adventurers thank him for his thoughtfulness. Thrilled about her new friendship, the Lancer girl suggests the four of them should go out for dinner together, turning the meal into a welcome party for the crafter. Disappointing the girl, the master informs them that unfortunately he still has a lot of piled up work to finish, so he has to pass on the invitation. Never one to miss a chance, the girl declares that it will just be her and the rookie going out tonight then, leaving the veteran completely panicking in the background. Shifting to a more professional tone, the big guy warns them not to stay out too late, because he has a new job for everyone the very next day. Confused by the rush, the MC asks if something unexpected came up for them to have a mission so soon. The leader reveals that the association received a mission request directed specifically at their group. The girl is blown away by the news, but the master corrects himself, detailing that to be exact, the request named only our MC. The shooter points at himself, surprised by the nomination, while the Lancer girl celebrates the fact that he was already requested on the exact same day he joined the clan. Explaining the details, the Scarf Warrior says it isn't a standard defense mission, but rather a very special request, sparking the kid's curiosity. Patiently, the big guy explains that the clients want the rookie to distribute his crafted weapons to the local residents, while the girl makes a comment about the famous firearms. Processing the info, the inventor sums up the situation, asking if basically he just needs to go there and hand out the rifles to the people. The master confirms his thought process right after revealing that the location for this distribution would be the city of Bandal. Startled by the destination, the Lancer asks if that isn't the famous frontline city constantly at war against the Demon King's army. Agreeing with the guy, the leader details that it is for that exact reason the requester, named Lord Olivia, wants her residents to fight using those different weapons. Reinforcing the dangers involved, the master reminds him that since it is not a normal defense mission, the rookie has total freedom to turn down the request if he does not feel ready. Keeping his serene expression, the hero accepts the job without even thinking twice. In his thoughts, the guy sees this firearm distribution as a blessing since he could hand out his gear naturally and level up super efficiently. Understanding the decision, the imposing warrior says he will pass along the confirmation and takes the chance to ask if the kid plans on officially joining the clan, since he is just on a trial period. Cool with the idea, the MC agrees to be made official, vaguely remembering that he indeed was not a permanent member of the group yet. Suddenly, a thought hits the shooter's mind, making him think it is extremely fishy that someone would specifically request an adventurer who is still just in his trial phase. The leader wraps up the prep work, letting them know that the following morning, the trio would head out to the city, with teleportation expenses covered by the client. Preferring to work solo, the crafter tries to argue that he could go on his own since he is just handing out rifles, but the master shoots it down, explaining that the guild's policy requires 3-person squads. Ignoring the rules, the girl once again grabs the rookie's arm, inviting him to explore the city together as soon as the mission is over. Trying to dodge her advances, the MC suggests she goes sightseeing with the veteran, but the girl instantly turns it down, claiming she is sick of his face, earning herself a scolding for being so inconsiderate. Resigned to his team, the shooter lets them know he is counting on their help for the next day, which is met with pure enthusiasm from the girl. The trio starts heading towards the room's exit when the inventor suddenly stops, turning around to ask the big guy one more question. Looking up from his paperwork, the clan leader looks curious about what the kid wants to know. Suspicious of the whole setup, the crafter asks how the client knew he had joined that clan when he was only there as a trial recruit. Acting natural, the warrior assumes the noblewoman probably checked the official registry since the member list is updated in real time. Walking toward the door, the hero reflects that a trial period is just a verbal agreement, so the ruler would have no way of knowing any of that, rhetorically wondering how someone from a city so far away already knew he existed. Noticing the kid's hesitation, the master replies that he should ask the Lord those questions directly and asks with a serious look if there is any problem with the mission. Looking the leader dead in the eye, the MC denies any issue, claiming he is just surprised that info about a mere level 28 crafter could travel so fast and so far. Reading between the kid's lines, the big guy gives a slight ironic smile and asks if he would like to cancel the request, but the guy turns the doorknob, stating he will do the job. Closing the door behind him, the shooter promises he will carry out the task flawlessly. The late afternoon sun lights up the royal capital's grand rooftops, creating a mysterious vibe in the air. Noticing her teammate's tense expression in the hallways, the Lancer girl asks if something is wrong with him, but the boy plays it off, saying it is nothing to worry about. In his mind, the rookie figures that being nominated for a specific mission less than half a day after joining the guild is an absurdly suspicious thing to happen. Remembering the corrupt mercenaries he faced before, the inventor wonders if the imposing clan leader is also part of the secret faction trying to prevent the Demon King's defeat. The next day, the grandiose fortified city of Bandal reveals its majesty, surrounded by massive protective walls. A massive pillar of magical light descends upon the main square, safely teleporting the 3 adventurers to their new destination. Admiring the huge stone walls, the veteran announces their arrival, while the girl already suggests they head into the residential area as soon as possible to get to work. The inside of the wall reveals rustic cobblestone streets and well-structured medieval buildings waiting for the heroes for hire. As they walk through the streets, the team notices there is no bustling activity and the shops are all closed. Observing the walls, the MC notices that even the soldiers look completely exhausted. With a serious look, the crafter evaluates that the situation in this place does not look good at all. Suddenly, one of the guards yells out, grabbing the group's attention. In an alarming tone, the sentry warns them to watch out for what is right behind them. The veteran lancer's eyes widen as he spots the threat approaching the gate. A colossal creature appears on the path, revealing itself to be a level 55 giant lizard, classified as a boss. Startled by its presence, the rookie lancer girl questions how a monster of that level managed to get there. Axe in hand, the soldier warns that the beast is advancing and the situation is dire. In a brutal attack, the reptile charges with everything it has got, throwing the heroes aside with the force of the impact. Quickly, the MC extends his hand and materializes a magical cube of blue energy. Through his creation skill, the kid forges a powerful rocket launcher in the blink of an eye. Aiming the weapon, he ironically comments that attacking people right as they teleport in is super bad manners. Wasting no time, the shooter fires an explosive projectile toward the colossal beast. An intense flash takes over the area as the impact of the explosion completely obliterates the target. Blown away by the scene, the loudmouth warrior is left speechless at that destructive power. The short-haired girl also does not hide her surprise, seeing her teammate take down the creature with a single strike. Facing the flames, the guard tries to wrap his head around what kind of ridiculous weaponry that was. While the inventor puts his gear away, the rookie girl praises his performance with deep admiration. But the relief is short-lived, as the armored sentry realizes the danger is not over yet. A flock of monstrous birds known as mangacaps charges furiously at the wall. With his eyes locked on the new enemies, the hero braces himself, believing those to be the horde's reinforcements. Suddenly, a loud, confident laugh echoes across the battlefield. Riding on his horse, a muscular, long-haired man charges head-on against the monstrous birds. In a swift motion with his giant axe, the warrior slices the monsters in half in a ruthless attack. The impact scatters the creatures, highlighting the newcomer's devastating strength. After clearing the path, the knight approaches the group and figures that kid must be the crafter named Alan. Stopping his mount, the man introduces himself as Gordo, the captain of the city's royal guard. Explaining his presence, the big guy reveals he came to welcome the group on direct orders from his ruler, Lord Olivia. Observing the captain closely, the MC notices that the warrior's status is hidden, sparking some curiosity. Pointing at a luxurious carriage nearby, the captain invites everyone to hop in. The Holy Guardian clan duo is totally mesmerized by the fancy ride waiting for them. Heading toward the vehicle, the Lancer girl mentions she has never ridden in anything so amazing and that they are getting total VIP treatment. Smiling awkwardly, the commander agrees, noting that it is quite the welcome for a low-level crafter, showing just how much they are expecting from him. The warrior explains that due to the prolonged war against the Demon King's army, the city's finances are on the verge of collapse. Continuing his explanation, he reveals that the firearms created by the kid are Lord Olivia's great hope to turn around this drastic situation. Taking on the responsibility, the hero says he will do his best to meet those high expectations. Secretly, the kid begins to wonder where the members of the faction that want to preserve the Demon King are hiding. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild headquarters, a secret meeting is taking place in a conference room. Executive Zainid reviews reports confirming that the crafter had defeated all 5 hitmen sent after him in the desert. Reading the paperwork, the big shot discovers that the defense clan is currently tracking the target's movements in the city of Bandal. With a serious look, the man figures that location is way too far for their surveillance to reach easily. Thinking about the threat the rookie poses, the executive reflects on the kid's ability to create that unknown technology. Determined to handle the problem, he concludes he needs to take swift action against the only crafter capable of such a feat. Recalling the dragon incident, the villain is certain that if nothing is done, that brat will become a massive roadblock for the guild's corrupt plans. The silence of the meeting room is broken by the sound of the doorknob slowly turning. The suited guy greets the newcomers with a cynical smile, apologizing for making them wait. Entering the room, the kingdom's #1 crafter, a level 175 named Hiroshi, makes his entrance, accompanied by a girl. Suspicious of the young woman in blue overalls, the executive questions her identity, since she does not look like the legendary blacksmith Benjamin. In a cheerful tone, the girl introduces herself as Annette, a level 13 blacksmith and Benjamin's daughter. The villain asks if the girl can handle the job, but she winks confidently, claiming that when it comes to structural analysis, she is just as good as her dad. Sighing, the man in the suit accepts the stand-in, reasoning that if the old blacksmith vouches for her skills, then it is all good. Wasting no more time, the executive asks them to start working on the project right away. Placing an assault rifle on the table, the villain instructs the duo to analyze the structure of that captured gear. The veteran crafter smiles, mentioning he had seen it in pictures, but in person, the shape looked even more bizarre. Holding the firearm, the guy in the yellow jacket tries to figure out the right stance to use it. Guiding the master, the suit guy explains that using it is similar to a crossbow, you just need to pull the mechanism to fire. Hyped by the instruction, the veteran pulls the trigger, firing a violent burst at the test armor and causing a massive explosion in the room. Laughing in surprise, the man is shocked by the gear's brutal fire rate. The young blacksmith's jaw also drops, commenting that the creator's level must be insane to make something with so much power and speed. Evaluating the item, the #1 crafter confesses that not even he could manufacture something with that kind of complexity. With a dark look, the guild big shot reveals that the weapon's creator was only level 15 when he forged it. Completely baffled, the veteran and the girl struggle to believe that logic-defying piece of information. The suit guy backs it up, saying he also found it hard to swallow, but it is the absolute truth, which is why he needs their services. Detailing the plan, he orders the duo to crack the structure and make a copy, even if the final performance turns out a little inferior. The girl inspects the piece, noting that the base power of a forged weapon is directly influenced by its creator's level. Deep in thought, she concludes that if Master Hiroshi made a replica, the result would have an attack power dozens of times higher than the original. Confirming her theory, the executive shows deep satisfaction at this chance for a power boost. The crafter in the yellow suit gives a sinister smile, thinking that all this effort is going to be totally worth it in the end. In his mind, the villain plans to put together an army of crafters capable of mass-producing those weapons to dominate the war. As for the young inventor, the suited guy coldly decides they just need to take him out to eliminate the competition. While this conspiracy brewed far away, the hero group finally arrives at the grand audience chamber of the fortified city. Sitting majestically on her throne, a woman with an eye patch thanks the adventurers for traveling all the way there. With a noble posture, the blonde woman formally introduces herself as Olivia, the sovereign and ruler of Bandal. Keeping his cool, the MC thanks her for the chance to meet, showing he is ready to get the distribution job started. Nervous about her friend's laid-back attitude, the Lancer girl whispers for him to speak more politely to the city's lord. Finding the situation amusing, the blonde woman reassures the girl, guaranteeing that it is totally fine for him to talk like that. Noticing she's a pretty easygoing ruler, the MC asks where exactly the weapon should be handed out to the civilians. Before giving that order, the ruler asks the crafter to explain what this so-called firearm is, because she needs to confirm how it works and if it is actually safe. With that, the guy raises his hand, agreeing to the request and activating his creation skill as an intense blue energy glows around him. Watching the magical process, the eye-patched woman follows along with plenty of curiosity. In a few seconds, the hero wraps up the synthesis and materializes a brand new assault rifle. The armored guards standing on standby nearby are blown away seeing the exotic equipment for the first time. To clear up the Lord's doubts, the young guy explains that there are several types of firearms, but the basic concepts are pretty much the same. Holding the weapon steady, the inventor demonstrates the correct stance, using the loudmouth Lancer as a test target. Without any hesitation, the guy pulls the trigger and unloads a burst of golden shots straight into his teammate's chest, who screams in panic. Furious over the surprise attack, the warrior asks what that was for, and the shooter answers with total chill that the gear is so easy to use it just fired off without a thought. At that moment, the ruler praises the demo, clapping her hands and finding it splendid that the safety lock nullifies damage against humans, allowing citizens to fight. Through her tactical view, she deduces that if the civilians focus on firing from the top of the walls, the danger will be minimal, and that will vastly reduce the burden on the soldiers. Hearing this explanation, the rookie girl raises her hand a bit timidly, asking permission to ask the ruler a question. Kinda confused by the strategy, the girl asks why the Lord is dragging everyday civilians into this dangerous war. Not catching her drift, the ruler asks the young girl to better explain her point of view. Stammering a bit, the girl mentions that the new firearm should be enough for the soldiers and defense clans to handle everything. With a serious look, the sovereign reveals that the real problem is the high maintenance cost of these mercenaries, since the kingdom's subsidies do not cover the expenses. During the explanation, she says the Demon King's army attacks a few times a month, forcing the city to stay on high alert all the time. Because of this constant threat, the city needs to keep multiple clans stationed, generating an absurd cost that is pushing their finances to the brink of bankruptcy. Grasping the gravity of the situation, the MC quickly deduces that they hired too many people and straight up ran out of cash. The blonde confirms the theory, stating that the kids' weapons can drastically cut down those costs, saving the local economy, which is the top priority right now. Thinking about the word urgent, the Lancer girl realizes the plan is of extreme importance and cannot be put off no matter what. Trying to impress the girl, the loudmouth warrior praises her intelligence, blushing hard. Annoyed with her friend, the rookie tells him not to be impressed by something so obvious and tries to look for backup from the hero, who simply ignores the whole scene. Cutting the small talk, the crafter warns them he can only forge 99 weapons at a time, so he wants to get the job started as fast as possible. Agreeing with the guy's hustle, the eye-patched woman decides to set up the distribution point in the city's main square. Handing the gear over to the Lord, the young man lets her know he will supply everything for free and reiterates that the safety lock prevents harm to humans. The ruler expresses immense gratitude for the help, holding the heavy weaponry and feeling the weight of that new hope. Putting full trust in the inventor's skills, the city's leader states she is counting on him to save her people. Following his superior's orders, the big captain escorts the adventurers down the red carpet toward the exit. Alone in the throne room, the sovereign analyzes the assault rifle's absurd stats, which features 30 rounds of ammo and automatic reload. Seeking a second opinion, she asks what the bodyguard hiding in the shadows thinks of that bizarre weaponry. The long-haired subordinate confesses that the gear's performance is unbelievable and impossible to be crafted by a mere low-level crafter. Giving a smirk, the ruler figures that it is exactly because of this power that the guild big shots are making such a fuss. Agreeing with the boss, the guard points out that the total attack power of a forged weapon heavily depends on its creator's stats. The man points out that the kid's level is abnormally low for that outcome, especially considering he does not even wear any magical accessories. Thinking ahead, the servant wonders if that guy could become worthy enough to shoulder a certain responsibility. Pondering the question, the eye-patched woman considers the possibility of the MC being the perfect vessel capable of defeating the Demon King. Based on the forger's capabilities, the city leader realizes she is looking at a true military prodigy. Radiating a red aura of ambition, the ruler concludes with satisfaction that she made the right call inviting that mysterious young man to her turf. Meanwhile, outside the palace, the sunny and bustling main square of Bandal is getting ready for the big handoff. The group of heroes sets up a small makeshift base near the fountain to start handing out the new gear to the locals. Holding a heavy rocket launcher, an elderly man is in awe, finding it hard to believe that a simple tube could work as a weapon. Reading the floating info, the old guy notes the bazooka's stats are incredible, but he is afraid he won't be able to use it right. After a long day of distribution, the group finally takes a break to chill in a busy city tavern. Even while eating a slice of pizza, the hero keeps synthesizing gear with his other hand, leaving the Lancer pretty impressed. Keeping his cool, the crafter just replies that this is not the first time he has mass-produced weaponry. Watching her teammate, the rookie strikes up a conversation, asking if he usually equips any kind of magical accessory. Hyped by the idea, she suggests that if the guy boosted his base stats with the right items, the forged weapons would become even deadlier. Looking at the girl, the shooter agrees neutrally, confirming that the gear would indeed get stronger. Downing a mug of beer, the loudmouth warrior throws in his 2 cents, saying his buddy's firepower is already way too insane, so accessories would be useless. Getting her face real close to the MC's and making her teammate jealous, the girl comments on how nice it must be to be so strong that you can just ignore combat items. Explaining his logic, the young guy clarifies that attack items are unnecessary, but defensive accessories that nullify status conditions would help with safety. With a darker expression, the guy points out that unlike the virtual reality game, if someone perishes in this world, it is game over for real. Because of this real danger, the hero reflects that he should start paying closer attention to his armor to guarantee his own survival. At that exact moment, the tavern floor shakes violently with a terrifying rumble, cutting the team's meal short. A soldier rushes desperately into the joint, screaming at the top of his lungs that the Demon King's army is attacking. The sudden warning catches the adventuring duo totally off guard, leaving them both wide-eyed at the imminent invasion. Showing 0 ounce of fear, the MC gets up from the table, ready to test drive the newly created arsenal. Outside the gates, the heavy, dark footsteps of the monstrous beasts make the ground vibrate intensely. A massive horde of mystical creatures swarms like an absolute plague toward the high walls of Bandal. The ridiculous number of monsters on the horizon shows that this attack is not just a simple skirmish, but a full-scale offensive. Positioned on top of the containment wall, the 3 adventurers brace for battle alongside the newly armed citizens. Spotting the locals, the veteran mercenaries defending the area find it super weird that civilians are mixed into the front lines. Focusing on the bizarre weaponry in the population's hands, the local clan members are left wondering what on earth those metal pipes are. Resting his trusty rocket launcher on his shoulder, the crafter instructs the defenders, telling them they just need to aim and press the fire button. Super pumped about the gear, the Lancer girl encourages her friend to unload all the ammo on the enemies, while he agrees at the top of his lungs. Giving a snobby little laugh, a pointy-headed mage mocks the duo's excitement, wondering which weak clan they must belong to. Using her inspection skill, the sorceress is startled to see that the girl is part of the renowned Holy Guardian clan. Trying to play it cool, the veterans rationalize that even though it is a big group, the members' quality varies, and that duo must be the bottom of the barrel. Ignoring the Lancers, the mage shifts her focus to the white-clothed inventor, finding out he is just a level 28 crafter. With an ice-cold, fully focused gaze, the hero aims his weapon of mass destruction toward the enemy troops. Blanketing the whole valley in a sinister purple fog, the remnants of the Demon King's army march to their certain doom against the modern weapons. Watching the enemy crowd, the MC calculates that those beasts' levels must be hovering around 30. Noticing the troops closing in, the loudmouth warrior alerts everyone and tells them to prep their long-range attacks. Right away, the locals mount their bazookas and rifles on the retaining walls, ready for action. At the same time, the conventional mercenaries cast fire spells and draw their bows. With a full-throated yell, Naoki finally gives the order to open fire on the horde. The deafening sound of gunfire echoes as the civilians unload the weapons crafted by the artisan. An absolute hail of glowing projectiles crosses the sky and violently strikes the battlefield. Keeping his cool in the midst of the chaos, Alan simply watches the result of his handiwork. Right after, a colossal explosion lights up the entire horizon, engulfing the monsters in flames. Coughing from the smoke, the adventuring duo is dumbfounded by the sheer magnitude of that blast. Suddenly, a system screen pops up in front of the hero, notifying him that he had leveled up from level 28 to 30. The veteran Lancer can barely blink at the devastation he just witnessed. Looking out over the plains, he notices that half of the enemy army was wiped out in a single instant. Without missing a beat, the shooter tells the locals they could use the gear again in a second, asking them to reload. As soon as the reload panel is done, the young guy adjusts his aim and encourages the civilians to give the monsters another taste of their firepower. Hyped up by the destruction, the residents celebrate the thrill of sweeping away the enemies all at once, completely losing their fear of the beasts. Standing just behind them, the veteran mercenaries are frozen, confessing they have never seen a scene like that. Sweating bullets, Naoki admits he already knew the power of the forged weapons, but never imagined the damage would be this absurd in the hands of a large group. Just then, a guard approaches the captain to warn him that the surviving beasts are closing in fast. Down below, the few remaining creatures attempt a desperate charge against the city wall. Stepping up to the front line, the loudmouth warrior tells the residents to fall back and leave the rest of the job to the heroes, ordering the archers to get ready. Following the command, the archer squad fires a volley of arrows at the remaining targets. Seeing the total wipeout, the Lancer comments they will not even need to fight, concluding that a main clan crafter is no joke. As the final enemies fall, the captain clenches his fists, celebrating the end of the conflict. Jumping for joy, the man yells that the remaining army was annihilated with 0 friendly casualties, calling it a historic triumph. Super excited, the rookie girl praises the MC's weapons and thanks him for wrapping up the fight so quickly, calling him the hero of Shuron Village. Noticing the guy's lack of enthusiasm, Hina's expression changes and she asks what is wrong. Sighing in frustration, the shooter complains that he missed a rare chance to level up a ton, Not getting it at all, the girl counters, reminding him that her teammate had just hit level 30. The hero explains that given the amount of enemies, he should have leveled up at least 10 times if it were not for the progression cap imposed by the beginner's trial. As a rule of this world, when an adventurer hits level 30, the system locks their progression until they pass the trial in the royal capital. Staring at the sea of magic stones left by the monsters, the MC laments that he would hardly ever get another chance to wipe out so many targets at once. Deep in thought, he reflects that if this invasion had happened just a few days later, the payoff for his experience gain would have been flawless. With the victory secured, the group climbs down from the walls and gathers in the safety of the castle's inner courtyard. Clapping her hands, the eye-patched ruler congratulates the young inventor on an excellent job. In the background, the bald mercenary whispers about the woman's beauty, while his buddy tells him to keep it quiet, afraid they will be overheard. The Lord explains she had planned to see the gear's power with her own eyes, but was shocked to find out it was already all over. Checking out the locals' arsenal, she notices those weapons are quite different from the one she had received earlier. With his eyes closed, the guy explains that due to the emergency, he forged weaponry focus on area of effect damage, and asks if he made a mistake. The ruler immediately denies it, stating that thanks to him, territorial defense run by the residents themselves has become a viable reality. Because of this absurd breakthrough, the leader decrees that from this moment on, the contracts of all the city's defense clans will be terminated. The only exception would be the Holy Guardian clan, which will maintain its partnership with the local administration. The sudden announcement leaves the complacent mercenaries in a state of absolute shock and total despair. To sweeten the deal, the ruler decides to triple the payout to Alan's clan as a fee for using the forged weapons. Hearing the news, the Lancer duo cheers with joy over the fat paycheck, while the bald man begs the Lord to reconsider, claiming the smaller guilds would not survive. With a cold glare, Lord Olivia asks if the future of those small guilds has anything to do with her city's well-being. The sharp comeback shuts the veterans up, leaving them with no arguments to fight their dismissal. Keeping a firm stance, the ruler explains that the people sacrificed a ton of money to foot the bill for protection, and now that they can defend themselves, cutting costs is the natural choice. Backing up their leader, the citizens start shouting in agreement, saying the maintenance fees were bankrupting the local economy. One of the locals points a finger right in the dismissed group's face, claiming the city only had to fight because those mercenaries were a bunch of useless bums. The mood gets heavy as the entire population starts calling the men names like tax thieves, demanding they leave. With a simple raise of her hand, the eye-patched woman calls for silence and calms the furious crowd. Showing a shred of mercy, she tells the mercenaries that the city would cover their teleportation costs as a small token of apology. Shaking with anger, the bald leader of the fired group lowers his head, cursing this whole humiliating situation. Watching the drama unfold, the loudmouth warrior asks his partner if they had just stolen their fellow professionals' jobs. Walking over to the MC's team, the ruler reassures them that they do not need to worry about that little ethical detail. She admits that the blame for the layoffs falls entirely on the weaponry created by the young inventor, but asks him to look past that. Pointing to the people celebrating in the streets, the woman highlights that the hero brought hope and smiles back to the city, and he should be proud. With a gentle look, Olivia encourages the shooter to keep up the excellent work and bring that same happiness to other threatened territories. Inspired by the leader's words, the two Lancers agree right away, ready for their next mission. Hearing the suggestion to spread the technology to the rest of the world, the bald mercenary shudders in panic. Overcome with despair, he realizes that if those weapons made it to other cities, his faction would lose their security monopoly and go bankrupt for good. Oblivious to the man's hatred, the MC turns his back and tells his partners he wants to resume distributing the gear soon so he can head back to the capital and take his trial. Glaring daggers at the inventor's back, the mercenary boils with rage, pinning all the blame for his ruin on that meddling kid. Taking advantage of the fact that the hero is walking along the edge of the wall, the man sneaks up on him. Hiding his true intentions, the bald guy calls out to the youth, asking to get a good look at that weird metal tube. Unsuspecting of the trap, the crafter turns his head slightly back to pay attention to the guy. With a diabolical and sadistic grin, the corrupt man charges with everything he has got at the kid. Right away, the mercenary delivers a cowardly shove from behind, tossing the shooter over the stone edge. The veteran Lancer witnesses the scene and freezes in horror, seeing his teammate plummeting into the abyss. Lord Olivia's eyes also go wide, unable to believe the audacity of that attack in broad daylight. Watching the freefall, the attacker calculates that from a height like that, the end would be instant, especially for a fragile item crafter. Confident in his victory, the mercenary mutters that the circulation of those weapons would blow a hole in his business and tells the hero to just perish once and for all.